the ultimate end game, but like for now, you would need some kind of way to have a VR and integrate like something physical. Because I've never used VR myself, so I don't particularly understand it too well. But I'm trying to imagine how you play like Counter-Strike in VR. So you like have a headset on. How do you run and without like a keyboard? You know what I
Dude,
mean?
they have you seen the I think who made it? I think it was like some Disney engineers or something. They I may be completely wrong there, but they made this. I think they called it like the hollow floor or something like. There's basically like these floor panels that omnidirectional, so and they react to the direction you're facing. So you can walk and it will just like follow you. And even though
Oh,
you're like walking on the spot, it's like reacting to which direction you're moving and like the speeds that you're moving, so you're able to kind of go at whatever pace you want, and it can understand which way you're going. So that's like a new development that's been demoed a bunch lately. So that,
oh,
they're figuring that kind of stuff out.
that's sick because that's when you're marrying like the technical skill of like gaming with the physical skill of sports. Because then you have to
Mm.
be in shape to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, it would
So it's
definitely be
like
helpful.
so I think that because that's a big complaint of like, modern sports viewers right now. It's like gaming is just a bunch of fat kids on computers. Like they're not athletic at all, which
Mm.
I mean, in some level they are right. It's not a very athletic thing, but it's athletic in a different way, but it's not traditional athletics. But I think once you get to that point, it's like you're marrying the two, and I think that's when they'll start appreciating it more, and then you will get even more mainstream stuff, more mainstream viewers, sponsors, broadcasts, stuff like that. I don't know how close we are to any of that, but I do think it's the future.
I mean, I could definitely see. I do feel like that is we haven't really trodden in that territory yet. Where yeah, you've got them because we had this in the we have had this for many years. Like let's say the most primitive version of this is we in the UK we had like a place called Quasar, but it was basically laser tag. Like that's
Oh,
because that's like you are like converging the technology like in this kind of the fake stuff, with technology where the guns, you're not actually shooting actual guns, they're laser guns, and the system knows that you're shooting that person, but you're in real life and you're kind of doing all the physical stuff. So yeah, there's not like a sport or anything that exists really that has those two things combined, like some super like modern advanced version of that. Where maybe everybody is running around with like glasses which have like these heads up displays on them, where there's like invisible things to the naked eye, but there's like the computer is generating all of this stuff, and then we can watch, and it's like I always forget because there's different types of like augmented reality where yeah, so yeah, I feel like we don't have that yet, but I could definitely see that being like a really cool like new wave thing if they really figured that out, because that would be like everybody's dream at this point, because everyone's hopelessly addicted to the technology anyway. So if there's some way to get to not lose that, and make it still like as pressing all the dopamine buttons, but you're also getting the physical activity in there, I feel like that would definitely please a lot of people with where we're going. By the way,
hopelessly
I started
addicted.
recording, by the way, because I'm just like we're just so yeah,
That's fine.
everyone,
That's fine.
welcome. It's to the podcast. This is Hazed, and he's coming back to esports, and so we're chatting, and we jumped on, and we just started like just talking. So which is what I thought would happen. Which is, I mean, it's good because it's a podcast. It's what we're supposed to do. So it's good. But we started
Exactly.
talking about Hayes was talking about how he feels like VR could be the something that could really help save esports, and we were sort of reflecting too on just what it's like being people that have been in esports for a long time, and do we think that we'll be in esports forever, or like what are the paths, or what are the limitations, or is it spiritually fulfilling, and why would we want to leave, like what are we currently missing. And I think we were talking a lot about how restrictive the niche can be that you're in esports. We're so specialized, and so like I guess tying it all back into I think the reason why you're here is James, is the fact that like you're coming back. So you made a decision. So you had that reflective period. You left. You reflected, and you've decided that you want to kind of be involved still. And that's not an uncommon thing. That's I think I've seen this story many times, and it makes a lot of sense. So it's like walk me through like what happened. Like you stepped away. Like why did you step away, and what was that process like of sort of reflecting on everything in the interim?
Yeah, just before I get into that, I just want to say what a host. You just took the last 25 minutes of conversation that we had and wrapped it up tightly into this bundle and segued it straight into the first question. That was beautiful. Well done. My word. Yeah, so the towards the end of my, I guess, playing career, which was the start of 2023. I was on TSM and for the second time round. And I was just, I kind of alluded to it in my tweet. I was like really upset all the time. Like every practice, I was really mad. I was taking it out on my players, and sometimes it was justified. Most of the time, it wasn't. Um, and it kind of just got to a point where I, you know, I had a night where well, I might have had a substance. And I reflected at that moment, I started reflecting on who I was in like the last week of scrims. And I was like, why would anyone want to play with me? Am I helping my team being like this? And, I was like, I kind of came to the realization I'm not, this is not good for me or my team. And so I needed to stop. I had to stop. So I messaged my coach the next day and I said, hey, I can't do this anymore. I, you know, I said some other things in there I regret saying as well. But like I said, I didn't reflect until much later in the year over like my whole career. But yeah, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for anyone around me. And so I took a year basically away from esports completely. I didn't really stream that often. I didn't follow any esport really. I think I watched maybe like some of the games NRG played at Worlds for Valorant. I watched some of those games, but outside of that, I didn't really watch much. Kind of just I didn't get on Twitter for like I maybe got on Twitter once every like 3 months.
Nice.
Kind of just yeah, I needed that. Um, Yeah, I spent a long year reflecting and really coming to terms with like, did I ever want to play again? Can I play again? Like, am I good enough still? Having those questions and like, what do I want to do next? If I'm done completely, and yeah, I kind of came to the conclusion that I do love esports. I like competing. It'll always be in my blood. I just love it. Even when I wasn't playing, I was missing it. I think there was a point where I played a small tournament with Steel actually in 2023. It was like a NSG weekly or something like that. He just messaged me one day. It's like, hey, we need a fifth. You want to play? And I was like, I don't know. Sure, I'll play. And it's like I had so much fun. It was just the most fun. I wasn't playing for money. I was just playing to play, and I was having a blast. And so, yeah, that kind of reminded me of what I was missing and who I was a little bit. And so at that point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to coach or not. I wasn't entirely sure, but I knew I loved competing. And so, probably around January of this year, or it's December, I can't remember. Um, I kind of went out and apologized to a lot of players privately about some of the things that I had, said and done in our teams and our time together, because I really felt bad, and realized that I really enjoy the team aspect. That's what I miss the most. I like competing, but what I miss is being a part of a team. I miss hanging out with the boys, fixing issues, working together on issues, coming up with strategies, and just hanging out. And it's almost like the locker room aspect of being on a team. I miss the locker room. I don't miss the game as much as I miss the locker room. And so I was like, oh, then I should probably maybe think about coaching, because people have always come on my stream and mentioned like, hey, you should be a coach. And I've never done it. I'm like, we'll see. I don't know. But it made me realize over that year, it's like I miss the locker room more than anything. I need to be in esports at least for a little bit longer. Definitely not as a player. I've come to terms with that. I'm not good enough anymore. But I can definitely help players get better, not individually, but as a team. That's my focus right now. I want to help teams get better. So yeah, that kind of all culminated in about a year or so. It's January or February is kind of when I came to the realization I wanted to coach. Then I waited a little bit longer, and then I sent out a tweet recently about it. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Sent out a tweet, and we're gonna see. I mean, listen, if I don't land a coaching job, it is what it is. I'll figure it out. But yeah, right now I'm trying to coach.
What was there something else that you were thinking about when you were sort of in this period of reflection? Because I imagine you weren't necessarily always thinking, well, I mean, you even just walked us through it. This was sort of that there was a moment when you were like, okay, this is somewhat of a defining moment where I realized this is what I miss, and so this is why I have to, jump back on this particular path. But I imagine you must have considered other paths too that I would assume would maybe not be esports related. So was there any other directions that you could have gone, do you think?
Yeah. I was working on 3D modeling. I was trying that out because I've always loved art. So, I was big into art as a kid. My parents kind of got me into it. My friends were big artists as well. And I was like, you know what, let's try and get back into art because I love that stuff. Let me try out 3D modeling because I love games. That's like it's a marriage of the two. So I started doing some 3D modeling. I do enjoy it, but the issue with that was I didn't realize how much strain it was going to put on your hand. Because I was doing 3D modeling for about 2-ish months, maybe 3. And after like the first month, I noticed, I'd be modeling for like 5 hours. My pen hand was just on fire. And I don't know, it's because I didn't work up from doing it for a long time, you work up the fatigue on it. So like you don't get tired fast, and you don't work up the endurance on it. This is a better way of putting it. And I don't know if that's the issue or it's because I've been gaming my whole life, like really like competitively going hard. And so my right hand is obviously my mouse hand. So it's, got 20 years of wear and tear on it. I don't know if that's the issue, but either way, I was like, I don't think I can do this. It's just my hand can't do it. So then I was like, okay, well, I like gaming, so maybe I'll just maybe learn to code and make my own game because I did go to college for coding. So that one I'm not ruling it out. I'm not going to rule that one out, but for now, I don't think I'm ready. I think that'll be like a side thing that I just work on like intermittently and see where it takes me. But, I think in order to make a game, especially solo, it's got to be something really small and you got to have an idea. And right now I don't have an idea, so I can't even really work on it. But yeah, so those were the two things I was working on or thinking about working on while I was out of esports.
Is that like do you have like so you were a professional player for a long time, so it's something you sort of identify with, many ways, I feel like. And I always felt like it's hard you can't really replace that feeling. And if you've had that feeling for a very long time, I feel like it definitely affects you, like making that transition, if you transition away from that identity. And is that something at all that you felt yourself, that because this is a transitional, like this is a potentially transitional period, even if you do come back, it won't be as a player, as a competitor in that fashion. So is that like a shift that's been kind of easy for you, or has it actually been more difficult?
I think it's been pretty difficult. It's funny enough, I had this thought. I was hanging out with my friends and we were playing Magic. I'm a nerd, sue me. Me and my friends were playing Magic, and they like to make fun of me because they've been with me before I was a pro, and they've been through the whole thing with me. And I was like, what's funny is more people know me in the world know me as Hazed than James. Like, I am now more hazed than James. That's so weird for me to think about. And so, yeah, like obviously, whenever you do something for a really long time and you're like in your mid 30s, you want to leverage everything you've worked on to like help you in your future. But everything I worked on as a professional gamer is not going to help me in game development. It's not going to help me in 3D modeling. So it's almost like, in some sense, I feel like I wasted that part of my life. It's a very I don't want to say nihilistic. It's just it's not a good way of viewing things. So yeah, but yeah, it's been very very difficult trying to come to terms with it. Yeah.
I totally understand what you mean because, and that's kind of why I asked the question because it's not. I don't think it's something you can really imagine until you've experienced it. But because I've had it in a couple different ways as well. I think one of them is with casting, where it's like you go from something you heavily identify with, and it's not just that you're executing the thing, but the stuff that kind of comes with it. And I never really, with casting at least, I always try to. I made a very clear distinction in my mind that any sort of validation coming from the internet is I call it like emotional roulette. Like you have to kind of separate yourself from it to a degree because if you get really on board with all of the validation, you also have to get on board with all of the negative stuff, and you can't control either one of those things. And it's kind of weird in a way because your sense, like, where is your sense of value coming from? And I think much like with being a player, you get to that point because you excelled and you spent a huge amount of time being sort of considered or I mean, as a competitor, you have to believe that you can win the most kind of difficult tournament of the year. Like that's the whole point. If you don't have that kind of feeling inside of you, you shouldn't be doing it. And so you've had this thing that you've beaten into yourself over and over and over again, that not just that you are capable of doing it, but you're in the position, you're in a professional team, you're playing against other tier 1 teams, you're legitimately competing for that thing, and you know that you're like the top 0.001% of the player population. Those are the people that it's a meritocracy. It's like a very clear and specific that you are better than all these other people, and you go from that and then you go into like you're saying, like, oh, now I'm doing 3D modeling, and there's people that have been maybe doing this from the age of 10 and they're going into this career. And so you're kind of like starting without any of that stuff now. And it's, I experienced something with that, like similar to that with casting as well, where it's like, even if you are someone that isn't, let's say, absorbing all of that external validation, there is like this element that you're getting this sense of of self-esteem from just having achieved all that stuff. So to then step down to like you're trying to climb up the bottom rung of the new ladder. It's like oh, like, who am I? it's like
What I just want to point out one of your skills, and I mentioned earlier how you wrapped up like 20 minutes into a segue. Is like you're so much smarter than me, and it's so impressive. Like I envy you so much because you just like encapsulated everything I felt so like succinctly. It was so perfect. You nailed it. It's like we do develop skills, but we don't know how they're going to translate, and oh my god, see, I'm not good at explaining things. You're so good at it. It's so frustrating. That's one of your skills, though. You have an amazing skill at
thank you,
just succinctly wrapping things up, and I wish I could do it because I'm just a yapper, dude. I'll just talk forever.
That's good. It's good. I mean, well, I think you've described it too. It's just a difficult. It's just a very emotional. It's an emotional. I mean, it's a transition, and it's like it's just one of those things where if you haven't gone through it, you don't know what it feels like. You don't know what it feels like, and you're probably only going to go through it when you. I mean, it's more likely that for most people that they'll get it when they get into their 30s because a lot of people will experience that, like, oh, my parents, or rather, I always wanted to be a lawyer, but then I realized that actually it was my parents that wanted me to be the lawyer, and I am actually, should be busking on the street with a guitar or something instead to kind of like feel like myself. And that's that same situation where like your identity in life, because so much of like who we are is like what we do. And so it's weird when you step into something new and it doesn't seem apparent that the skills transfer like you're talking about. Because I think that's one of the things that you're saying, and it's because you use the word like, oh, the time's wasted, and I know that you don't think that it's actually wasted, but it does feel like that because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, I'm like, I spent like thousands of hours like shooting things with a mouse. It's like, how does that translate? Like that actually, I think you said how it translated because like, oh, my wrists are actually kind of weak and fucked up because of like years of abuse. So actually, maybe some things get more challenging because of this career path. So it's super interesting.
Yeah, and so there's definitely skills that we have gotten as players, as commentators, etc. Like anyone who works in the esports industry professionally, that we have acquired skills, but we don't necessarily like realize it until later. So like when people think of a professional gamer, they obviously, like you said, we like point and click stuff really well. But in a team game, what we really got good at is communication and like working together in a team, and having to rely on others to like for certain tasks, and just being a team player. We have great communication skills, generally speaking. Some people, there's outliers, right? There's some pros who suck at it, but most of them are really good communicators, and that's a good skill to have. And most companies are going to want someone who's a great communicator, someone who can work together in a team. But obviously, you need more than that. You can't just have that one skill uh, and be able to move on from esports. But you do acquire some skills. It's just something you don't really consider
Yeah.
until much later in life.
Yeah, it makes sense. It reminds me of when people say that, oh, the way that they like to work out is playing a sport because they don't realize that they're getting fit by
Mhm.
playing the sport. And that's kind of that. It's like actually what kind of why they're doing it. But in reality, it's that the fun of the activity like masks that. So it reminds me of that. And I think that's true. It was interesting going into the general manager role a little bit because I've always been just I will always consider myself like a player at heart and a competitor at heart, and that's definitely my roots. Even though I went into commentary and I'm more known for that, it's and then going into the GM role, it was interesting because the team environment it's it's repeated in everything. Whenever you're working with anyone, you're always trying to achieve something. And I found that the team environment is super interesting because it's really pure. Because a small number of individuals that are like some of the best in the world at what they do. They all only care about one thing. Everyone on the team only cares about one thing, which is winning. And so everyone has to orient and sort of calibrate themselves around that one singular goal. So it's really clear, like, and the result as to whether you get to that goal or not is really clear. And so that's I started to realize how much I appreciated that when I started to work in like other companies, because just anything I've done that's like not being on the competitive end. Like I worked with AIGLing for a couple of years doing various different roles, and I've worked outside of esports and other areas too. And it's interesting to me how like when you go from the team environment to any other type of company, it's exactly the same stuff. It's just harder to orient people around the outcome because it's so clear. It's just when you're in a team, it's all merit based. So it's so easy to kind of figure things out. And it's not any different in when you go into like a company environment. It's just that a lot of the variables are just a lot more confounding and kind of muddier, and everything's a bit noisier because it's harder to understand like what is that thing that we're all trying to achieve. And then you realize that, or at least I've realized from all my observations, that management ends up being by far the most impactful outcome. I feel like if you have good management, you can actually leverage the actual skills that you have available to you in the people that are around you. And if you have bad management, bad leadership, it's just leadership. It's just like the in-game leader in the team or the coach in the team. If you have then those are the people that also set the culture. If those people don't do a good job, it doesn't matter how good the people on the team are around you. it's just not going to work out very well. So it's interesting seeing sort of getting the very pure example of how teams should operate, and then like looking at, other areas of the world where you don't have mega competitive individuals that are calibrated in the same way. It's just super interesting. I realized I learned a lot more about how things work than I thought I knew before going to that environment. So it's a bit of a jumbled mess, but I think, yeah, you kind of get the gist as to what I'm sort of getting at.
Yeah. Well, would you, after experiencing the GM role, is that something you could see yourself doing again in the future or no?
It is actually, but I think the problem is that it's esports is too volatile for that role to feel really good, because like with 100 Thieves, for example, it's a long-term position. You're there to kind of build long-term systems and all of these various things. So you're operating on a kind of slower time horizon or a longer time horizon than, let's say, a coach who's, they're responsible. The head coach is responsible for the wins day in and day out, and the GM is responsible for like longer term, like winning outcomes. Is maybe the best way to like summarize it. And in esports, like, I had the first year we had like a really great results with the team in 2022, and then in 2023 the results were a lot poorer. I made a bunch of mistakes that made it so that was, I contributed to that with a lot of my mistakes and various other things, and that's totally fine. As you get to the end of the year and it's like, okay, now we've been tracking everything very diligently. We know all the errors and the difficulties are. We have all the data, and so now we get to try to make different decisions, because you only get like a couple good spots maybe a year in the year as the GM to maybe make a meaningful change, because as soon as you get out of the off season, you're in everyone's in sort of performance mode and execution mode, so you can do tweaks, but it's going to be very minimal. You can't change players, like in most cases. You can't make any big changes. You shouldn't really change the staff, like the coaching staff or any of the personnel, like the way that the players are even doing this, the scrimming and practices and stuff like that. Like, you can make changes, but you shouldn't disrupt it too much. So it suddenly starts to become this case where you have to just like sit back and just observe and try to manage things the best you can, but you don't get too many opportunities to really put in like big changes. And that's kind of, I think, what the role is there to do over time. And then hopefully over time, you've managed to create like a really good team of people, because sometimes like you do need to test someone out in a role for like a year or two, sometimes, I think, and like try to develop them if you see potential in them. And so it may be the case that that's going to be a lot of losses, but you're making an investment. So you're making these longer term bets and investments, and you're learning more about whether you were right, and if you were, like, why was that? If you were wrong, why was that? And then, so it's this iterative process. It's just very long term, and the esports is not very long term. And so I feel like with 100 Thieves, we're at a spot where I was like, okay, I feel like I could really fix a lot of problems. But then sort of, okay, now, there's another round of layoffs and I'm affected by that. So I'm sort of on the way out. So it's I don't think there's enough stability for me to feel like that role would make sense for me, because I just feel like I'm not able to do the job properly. So that's the issue with it, I feel like. Yeah.
I totally understand that. I have the same feeling about esports as well. There's no stability at all, and it frightens the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I love it, so that's why I'm, getting back into it right now. I mean, like, I don't have retirement money. I've been very, open about that on a stream. People are like, "Oh, you're rich," blah blah blah, and I'm like, "Guys, I am not rich. Like, I don't know how to put this. I'm just not." So I do need to get a job eventually, and so obviously right now the best way for me is to coach. But I don't. There is no stability. It's frightening. You're on the money with that. I don't know what to do with esports moving forward. I don't know how it's going to be sustainable.
It's a very difficult one. I don't know. I'm trying to think if because I know NA has like an IGL, has always had like somewhat of a shortage of good IGLs. And I don't know about coaches. I actually think that there are good coaches. I think it's really hard to get a shot on a top roster. I think that's like really the main problem. I would assume that you would have, with your reputation and just sort of people know you, like you'd have a better shot than probably some people that are more experienced at the current moment, but lesser known as well. Because that's got a lot to do with it too. Just connections, name, having a name that can get you in the door and that sort of thing. So And it seems like if you do get your name in, name in there, and you do a good enough job, that you can definitely stick around. But it's hard though. Like, are you stuck in just one game? Is that a problem? I don't know of any
Yeah.
coaches, except like, coaches make a switch, but it's like Chet made a switch, for example, but obviously, it's not like he's just switching every year or something. That's like, you can't really afford to do that. It's quite risky. James RL did, he switched back to CS for a bit, but he could still do Valorant. But that's also because James is also a beast. So, um,
That guy's mad funny. I love
oh,
James.
James is awesome. Yeah.
He's funny. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm definitely in a privileged position where I was a professional in both games, Counter-Strike and Valorant. So I technically could coach both games, and I think we talked a little bit before. I think you turned on the VOD or whatever, the recording about it. I would need some time to get back in the CS. I'd probably have to study for like, I would say half a year before I'd be really comfortable. Yeah, maybe 3 months, 3 months, 6 months. Or I'd be really comfortable being able to coach a team because I'd have to relearn the meta.
Mm.
It's I've been gone like 5-ish years. Yeah, 2019 is the last time I played. Really played. So I've been gone for quite a while, and the game has definitely changed since then. I mean, it's a new game. We're in CS2 after all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'd be a lot for me to learn, but I am in a privileged position where I could technically get a job in multiple games, but that's only because I was a player and I have connections. I have a head start over a lot of people, like you were saying. And it's hard for anyone who doesn't have connections or a history in that esport to get a job. It's almost impossible. I dare say it's almost impossible. You almost have to be a content creator where like you have a YouTube channel where you're doing analysis constantly and you're getting views and you're getting some traction on your YouTube or whatever, TikTok, whatever it is that you're doing. Um, and people are really starting to respect your analysis, and maybe they're talking about it on Reddit, etc. You need some kind of social media presence, I think, in order to get a job. You can't, I, there are exceptions. Like you mentioned Chet, obviously I have a big history with Chet. We go way the hell back. I actually got him his first job in
Oh,
esports.
nice.
Yeah. So on CLG, he we were looking for an analyst. This is when PETA was our head coach,
Mm.
and so 2016, and he sent in a bunch of like analysis that was asked. PETA sent out like a tweet or something. I don't remember what he did, but looking for an analyst, and he said, analyze this game. And he sent in a bunch of analysis. And at the time, he was Tarek's mod.
Yeah.
That's how I knew him. And he messaged me, he DM'd me and said, hey, I sent in a bunch of stuff, but like I haven't got anything back from PETA. He hasn't said anything. And I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is good. Like you put in a lot of work. I might not agree with everything in the analysis, but he's clearly putting in a lot of effort. So I went to our boss. I didn't go to PETA. I actually went to the boss. I went to Hotshot, and I said, "Hey, this guy's pretty good. You should hire him. I think PETA hasn't gotten back to him, but you should consider it." And like the next week, he hired him. And so yeah, me and him go way the hell back. And I feel like that happening now is, I mean, I want to say it's almost impossible. Like that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. It's
So
definitely
yeah, I
not
got a head start. I've got a head start. I've got experience. I've got connections. I could do it, but it's still even hard for me because just because you were a player and even an IGL doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. Someone commented on Reddit whenever I made my tweet like a couple weeks ago about me wanting to field offers for coaching. Someone said just because he was a good player doesn't mean he's going to be a good coach. And I agree completely. There's a lot I still need to learn, but the only way I'm going to get better at it is by doing it. So, if I don't get a job right away, I understand. But there's plenty of teams I can still help, and I can get experience, being a better coach, and then hopefully the opportunity comes around. We'll see.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think, and a lot of it's also about like what do you have that you can't easily like study for too, because I think that's like the main the main thing really is you have like all of this experience of actually competing, and all of that experience really does amount to a lot of positive impact if you're also like as you're saying, like supplementing like the relevant study in the respect of the role is there. Then I think, yeah, you will do well, because I think this is one of the things is, if coaches don't succeed who do have this background with a lot of experience, I think it's usually more probably down to not having as a player put in the time to really understand how to study and how to do anything except play. Because I think there's like an older generation of players that definitely they got really good from just playing a lot, and they didn't get really good from studying as much maybe as you kind of need to, more so these days. It's also more possible these days because there's so much more information everywhere. So if you really are that kind of person where you're like, I just want to like study my way through this, and you have like a really strong work ethic, then you'll be able to get so much out of that because of how much info is out there. Whereas in the old days, it's like, yeah, the people that played a lot, they figured stuff out, and they wouldn't. There was like actually a culture of not sharing stuff in the old days, where you'd hide demos
100%.
and like all sorts of stuff. You try to like hide as much as you could, and because it's such an edge. And so like it's the opposite world now. But there are a lot of players who you put them in like a regular job, and they wouldn't be able to function because they just don't. All they know how to do is click heads.
Yeah.
So long as you can like open a book and stuff like that, and do some study here and there, you'll probably do a great job.
Yeah, right. A gamer opening a book? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, even these days, like not even gamers, everyone's having trouble opening books.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I was guilty. I didn't read a book until I was like 31,
Oh
32.
wow,
I
okay,
didn't.
all right. What was the book? Fuck, what was the book that like got you to like finally get in there?
Well, I'm a nerd, right? So I started reading fantasy, types of novels and stuff like that. I don't read a lot. I read some, but the one I started reading, the first one I started reading was called The Stormlight Archives. It's a 6-book series by Brandon Sanderson. But yeah, it's just like it's a fantasy, type of book. I've always been into like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But now I appreciate books more. Now that I'm older, I appreciate books because I actually value like getting away from the computer and just, almost having quiet time. God, I am so old now. Oh God. Yeah, I really value that now. Like I can, what I was doing for a while was going out to like the pool and reading it, and just not getting in the pool. I was just outside in the sun, just reading. Or if I didn't want to read, I would listen to the audiobook version of it, but I prefer to read it. But yeah, reading is something people should do more often. But one thing I wanted to comment on was you were saying, a lot of players just run around and click heads. They don't really study, and there's more stuff to study nowadays than before. I actually think it's kind of reverse in a weird way. And in a sense, it's kind of reversed. Now I think there's less to study, only because, and I think this is only because of Valorant, but Valorant doesn't have demos, whereas
Right.
Counter-Strike did, because back in the day, I used to watch demos almost as much as I played. I'm not even kidding. I used to watch so many demos because I wanted to get better. And I knew the best way was to watch the best players in the world, see what they do. And then I knew probably on some level I couldn't understand why they were doing it, but I could at least copy it. And then eventually I'll understand it. So yeah, like the best example was for me, for my teams, this is back when I was in like open, like ESEA open, ESEA main, etc. I wasn't like pro or anything. I was on train, DE train, I was the Ivy anchor. And so I was getting farmed. So I went and downloaded like every train demo I could find of all the top teams. I watched everyone who played Ivy. And I was like, okay, what are they doing? When are they using their utility? When are they rotating? Where do they move to? You know, when do they get aggressive? When do they play passive? I like looked at everything, and I instantly got better at playing Ivy. But you can't do that in Valorant because there's no demos. So how
Yeah.
do you study?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's funny too, because what you're talking about there is like you're having to actually like what you want is you want to not get farmed on Ivy, and
Yeah,
so to actually get to the potential solution, which there you realize, oh, if I just watch all these players, I'll at the very least get some new ideas as to how to change what I'm doing at the very least. So definitely going to get some kind of a positive result here, and but then you have to go and take all of the extra effort and go out of your way quite a lot to go download the demos, to then go watch the demos, to find the correct rounds, to find the rounds where like, you know, maybe the player like you're watching has a gun, and like, you know, you're having to actually sift through a lot of stuff. It's not like you can click on the YouTube video that's got like an awesome thumbnail and like, this is how you play Ivy, this is how 10 pros play, you know, like there's no content like that. So there's a much bigger burden of actual work for you to do yourself there. And I think that's interesting because I think we're heavily conditioned more and more with how content is consumed in general to not have as much of this, like, we're not willing, I feel like, to put in as much effort on average to like try to solve problems like that. We want to find something that's like a very easy way. And like even with the YouTube content and it's like, you know, making videos now, I'm like, I was doing my own analysis of like Mr. Beast's videos, because I'm like, okay, this guy is a master of YouTube. He understands precisely how to get like maximum like viewer attention. Like, how does he, like, what does he do? Everything he's doing is completely deliberate, every single thing. And I was watching his videos and I'm like, holy shit. The camera cuts to like a different shot like every second, like of like a 20-minute video. It's all the shots, I think it was like the longest I counted like for like an entire 20-minute video, and they pretty much all of them follow this formula. It's like 1 to 3 seconds. Like there won't be a shot that's longer than 3 seconds. It's actually insane. And that's because like, yeah, your brain is just like, yeah, you're just glued to the screen because your brain wants to see what the next shot is constantly. It's so crazy how that works. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because, you know, he's figured that out, and by doing so, he's also like leading the way and showing everyone else like this, just like similar trends. So other people are, you know, doing this on TikTok. Obviously, like it opens up and it's instantly like pressing all your dopamine buttons, all these different things. So just the way that I feel like our expectations around how we get the return is very different than it was in the day when you're like downloading demos. Because I used to do the same thing. I would like watch sometimes the same demo like 20 times. I would just like to really study it, and I would never do that now.
yeah. Oh well, yeah. If we had demos, I'd probably still do it in Valorant, but we don't have them, so can't really do it. No, I think what's important and the biggest difference is when you watch a demo, the difference between a YouTube and a demo, I should say, the biggest difference is when you watch a demo, you can see how it fails, how like what they're doing doesn't work. But when you watch a YouTube video of like, let's say on how to play Ivy, all you see is how they succeed. So
yes.
It's not a good way of learning because you need to see how they messed up, why something didn't work. And you don't get that anymore watching like these tutorials on YouTube for Valorant and in any game. It's just always like, this is how you play Ivy. And then they show how they got like 3 kills. And it's like, okay, show me when you didn't get 3 kills. Show me when you messed up. And I can understand the difference. You don't get that anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because everyone making content is incentivized to make their content live up to whatever the title or thumbnail was, and to like you feel like you actually like got the good product, the value at the end. So if it's like if they show a more balanced version, it's like that's not going to be, you know, good for a video. So that is interesting. That's a really interesting point. Yeah,
like you get some kid in your game that's doing grim walls, but like he's messing it up like five times, you know, 4 out of 5 times he's messing it up, and then he doesn't know what to do when it messes up, and so he's just running around with his, you know, chicken with his head cut off. He doesn't know what to do. He's a useless teammate, and so you're like, oh, but the one time he hits the wall, he gets like 3 kills, and he thinks he's like some god, and you're like, dude, you need to start coming up with a plan when you fuck up the wall. Pardon my French, but like. I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting frustrated just thinking about ranked. It
That's good.
frustrates me.
It's a good point. It's a really good point. It does change definitely how, like, I do wonder, like, I'm definitely not as tapped into how people think now because I mean it's kind of hard when you like I mean we just grew up differently. We grew up in a different era when we got good at stuff, and like you were giving the example with the demo and just that process, and the process is so different now. um I do think that oh, it's hard to teach like good thinking skills in game because of like how overwhelming all of the information is. Because when you were saying, going back to like CS, it's, yeah, you'd have to take some time to kind of, catch up on the meta and stuff. But it's interesting in the sense that the principles are exactly the same, and all those principles are kind of the same in Valorant. It's just there's some different variables, and it's just applying them based on whatever the context is. But like a good angle, like, yeah, it might be slightly different in CS to compared to Valorant, because in CS you've got, actually, did they fix this in CS too? Like the right eye peak? I don't think I think it's still like in the game, maybe not as severe as it was.
I don't
Um,
know, actually.
I have to double check that. But yeah, you have like these subtle differences on like, this is like fundamentally what makes a good peak versus a bad peak. Well, where is the vision, like how does the vision cone work for the player model, and you have the distance advantage, and like you have like all of these things that are universally applicable into like what a good angle is or not. And even if you don't have, because we don't really have this, but you don't have like the data on what a good fight is, your intuition does a pretty good job if you're a pro player. Like you can feel like what a good fight is if you've trained yourself well on like understanding these fundamentals. So then you just have to like layer on util on top. Well, what is the purpose of util? Well, the purpose of the util is, in first principles, are really simple. Like it's going to it's going to delay you, or it's going to cut off space, or it's going to like there's like these principles, and you've got 10 different abilities. Oh, these abilities they all fit into these categories. So, this like delays my opponent, or this cuts off space, or whatever it might be. So I think sometimes, like, if you think like that and you see the game through the first principles, I think you have no problem like very quickly adapting to like how the game actually works. But I wonder sometimes how many people actually approach it like that.
I think a lot of the people who probably approach it like that don't even necessarily continue as a player. They just immediately try and like do some kind of coaching role. Like, Chet is a good example. I don't think he ever really played that much. He just immediately was like, I'm good at analyzing stuff, and it's what I enjoy doing, so I'm going to just move into that. Their entry point is the game itself. But I think it's interesting because when I try and dumb down competitive, well, I don't know if I want to say competitive gaming as a whole, but maybe what it really is a battle of like psychology. It's about reading trying to predict what the other opponent wants to do, and beat that essentially at its core. I mean, there's obviously a lot of mechanics involved to get to that point, but especially as an IGL, all you want to do is read your opponent, or make them think something is happening and subvert that expectation. And that applies across almost all games. Any competitive game, that is essentially what it is at its core. Obviously, it can be beaten by like a Demon 1 in the server. It's like, oh, I don't care what you're doing, I'm just going to kill you. Like, that can happen. But I think at its core, it is really that simple. It's just a battle of psychology between the two teams or competitors.
Yeah, I mean that's when things get really beautiful. Like the most fun games are when both teams have the best possible like fundamentals, and so that neither team will make those mistakes around fundamentals. So then it really truly is this battle of, and it's like the closest, what's the best way to put it? It's a battle of psychology, like you say, and trying to outthink the opponent in a way the matches can get crazy. And that's what defines to me like a true like tier 1 level match, because you have to play disruptively, because if the other team, if you allow them to execute on their fundamentals, they'll just take the advantage, and then they will execute the advantage, and because they're a top team. And so you have to play disruptive. And so they know that you have to play disruptive. And so now you start to get into the territory that's super interesting. That's like where the best games actually happen at the top level. And it's not those games where you've got a tier, like this is how I always distinguish between a tier 1 team and tier 2 team is that a tier 2 team is a team that still makes mistakes on some of the fundamentals. And so if you're a tier 1 team, you could actually just play only your fundamentals and not apply this like extra layer of the game where you're trying to be disruptive, you're trying to get in their head, you're trying to get ahead of what they're trying to do, you're trying to condition them more and lure them into certain traps. No, you just play like the super good fundamentals. They will make a mistake, you punish it, and then you win by taking less risks and just playing more consistently. And that's how like a lot of, I remember as a 1v1 player in Quake, and also on some like the 4v4 games I would play, that was like the same principle would always would apply. It's like you see how the level of the opponent is early on, and you see like what types of mistakes they make, and then you can very quickly understand the type of game you need to play to beat them. So it's that level is like what makes competition so fun for me personally. That's like where the best stuff happens.
I feel like you were in an amazing position around the time of Astralis being like the literal no one can touch them in the world. They were the best team. You got to cast a lot of their games live. Like that, witnessing a team performing at that level, it's like, I don't know. It's going to sound really corny, but it is like beautiful. It's like, oh my God, they don't make mistakes. And like they're reading them perfectly. The whole team as a unit did everything together, not literally, but like figuratively. They did everything. It was like a hive mind. It was so perfect watching them play. And it's kind of what I think as competitors all aspire to, to achieve. And I feel like you had a front row seat to all of it, dude. You got to be in every tournament. You casted a lot of their games, dude. It must have been so cool.
They were. It's so funny in a way, actually, as well, that we talk about the way that when people talk about reference Astralis, they still are referencing the same time period. Even the team is like continued on in like various iterations. It's like, I feel like if you say Astralis, everyone is thinking of the roster that won a bunch of majors back to back, and the Astralis Era is all you're just automatically thinking of. And it was interesting because they figured out like a bunch of really, really hard things all at once. I feel like they like you said, everyone on the team had the exact same idea as to how the game works to a level where they're all able to just know what the other person's going to do. And that's like, I think most people who've competed at a high level have had that experience from time to time where like it's like your teammate, you don't even need to almost communicate. You just know your teammate will act in certain ways off of even information that they get. And so you can start doing stuff knowing already how they're going to react without communication. Like that synergy feels amazing. And that's like, if you ever see a team lifting a trophy, that's probably the space that they were in to be able to do that. It's always like that. If you look at EG winning champions just recently, they really epitomized that. I think Valorant shows it, I think sometimes more so than other games, because there's so much shit going on in Valorant that if you are able to have that, achieve that effect, you can just outmaneuver your opponents because you can react so fast as a whole team. And it's really fun to watch that in Valorant. But Astralis like had that going for them consistently, and then they also were so studied. They were like obviously the most studied team, and people still couldn't beat them because they not only did they have like the culture and the sort of team philosophy was like correct, because most teams will win a tournament and then they'll like let off the gas a little bit and not really know necessarily all of the reasons as to why they even won that tournament. But Astralis managed to like not let off the gas. They switched from we were chasing to win this trophy, and now it was actually just another day in the office, this extra major win, because our goal is actually to win all of these majors, and they're not like letting off the gas. They're innovating so that people can't like catch up to them by studying them too much. They also applied the fundamentals of the game in a way that was innovated on like maps like Overpass or like Nuke. Like they innovated so much of the fundamentals. Like their mastery of control of space on Overpass was incredible. Like how they came up with that, it just destroyed everybody. So like they did so much cool shit all at once. They had like they got the sports psychologist in. They introduced a lot of like practices from traditional sports, like the relationship between Zonic and the entire team was like just incredibly good. I mean, they had so much going for them, man. It's like incredible.
What I find so funny about what you said is that whenever I brought up Astralis and I was picturing them playing in my mind, I was picturing them on Overpass.
Yeah.
And then you said, "Oh, that is how influential they were." Like during, we immediately thought of the same map without saying it. We thought Overpass. Oh my God! But you're on the money. I don't know. I don't think I've seen a team get to that level since. And well, I don't want to say any esport because I haven't watched them all, but that level of just dominance, not only strategically, but also individual. I mean, I think a big part of their dominance was, like you said, it was like the culture and like the way they worked together. It was just perfect. But then when teams started to try and break them down and come up with like countermeasures to their strategies, et cetera, they still couldn't beat them because individually they were just some of the best in the world. So it's just like this mountain. They were all peaking at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to see a team. I mean, obviously NIP's, crazy. Was it 81-0 or something like that? 83-0?
87, I think.
87? I don't know.
Something like
some
that,
crazy
yeah.
number.
Like
Yeah,
land victories,
but I think
yeah.
as crazy as that is, I think the Astralis Peak is more impressive,
Yeah.
just because it's a developed game at that point. Like NIP could technically abuse things that hasn't been figured out yet within the game, like the game systems. But dude, that I think the EG run was insane, but I think even if they stuck together, it wasn't going to last. I think individually, their individual skill of especially Demon One just caught a lot of people off guard, and they weren't ready for that level of aggression. But I think moving forward, I think teams would have been more ready for it. But obviously, strategically, they were insane too during that run. Potter did a great job. Busio did a great job IGLing and making good reads, and credit to the whole team, because you can't win a tournament just by having one guy go off, but it definitely helps. Definitely helps.
Yeah, they found some really good. They found some sweet spot, I felt like, with being able to switch between playing extremely fluid and dynamic and the like more set stuff that they wanted to do. They had like a very good understanding of when the good moments were to do it. And it seemed like every game that they played, they were never ever forced to play the other like team's game ever. Like they were always super comfortable like playing their own game. It's almost like watching like they were scrimming or something in these matches, because they were just able to always look comfortable in their own game. And I'd have to like go back and look and see like why that was, or like why teams struggled to like disrupt them. But I mean, that's one of the things I noticed, at least, that seemed to really go their way.
One thing I noticed about playing EG, this was early 2023, is just before I quit. We were scrimming EG quite a bit on TSM. I remember being really, or actually it might have been on NRG. I can't remember how far back it was actually, but I just remember scrimming them. And Potter, is when they had Potter as a coach. We were on Fracture, and I just remember being really impressed at some of their ideas. We were, funny enough, we were beating them in scrims. They didn't have Demon 1 yet, but we were beating them in scrims. But the ideas that they were using and implementing in these scrims, I was like, no one else is doing this shit. This is super impressive, and they're gonna be a good team. Like individually, we were out fragging them. I'll just be honest, like we were. I had better individual players, but if their level of skill rose and they had better ideas than us, I won't even lie. Their ideas are crazy. We were playing, so we're on Fracture. They had set up this strat on, oh god, I can't remember which side's A and B. I think it was A.
Dude, I always do that with Fracture. I think there's something about our CS brains that just like, because there's always a big site and a small site, and they're like always kind of correlate to like A and B. And Fracture for some reason like has like there's something about that map that I just always mix them up too. It's the only map I've ever had that with. So there's okay, I feel validated. Thank you.
Okay, no, it happens to me on it. To this day, it still happens to me on Fracture, and it happens to me on Sunset as well. For some reason, those two maps I can't do. But it was the site with Heaven. So had the Heaven thing not drop. So it's not B. I think B had drop.
I'm
so
like,
I think it was
so
Heaven
mind fucked right now. I have to like find an image. This is so mad.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was A. So, but anyway, they what they did was they created a strat where they pushed us in the spawn. I think it was with a Killjoy ult. And then they they played Breach and Sova. So Sova at the time was like not played on that map. It was really weird. And so they pushed us in the spawn. And so obviously the way people dodge Killjoy ults is everyone stands on the edge of it, right? And when you're in spawn, there's a very thin line that you can stand on. Like there's not a lot of edge you can stand around the perimeter of it. So everyone's grouped up in this like one spot. And so what they did was they breach stunned from like the rope area in the middle of the map, and the Sova was there too with ult. So whenever the Killjoy ult was at like 1, they knew everyone would be standing right on the edge of the ult. So then they'd breach stun and Sova ult it. And I remember they killed like 3 of us.
That was amazing.
And I was like, dude, no one is doing this shit. That is crazy. By the way, you okay with me cussing?
Oh yeah, you're good.
Okay,
good. Yeah.
No, that really surprised me, and I was like, this team has great ideas. Like that's impressive. They're gonna go places, but like individually, they're not. Like they have to upgrade their game individually for them to be a good team, and they did.
Yeah,
they found the duelist, you could say, of 2023, and it just with the good ideas. Obviously, bringing in Ethan was huge for them because, I mean, I'll say this: I think he's the best teammate. He's the best team player I've ever had. Like, bar none, Ethan is the best team player, maybe even ever. I don't know. That's a stretch because I haven't played with everyone, right? But he is incredible. He just always makes the right play. He always is like aware of where his teammates are. He has good comms. He's an amazing team player. And so I think that combined with bringing in Demon One, who is like the star duelist peaking at the right time, and then also having amazing strategies and like interesting ideas on how to use abilities, all that just like culminated into the storm of like what happened at Worlds.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would last, like I said, even if the team stuck together. Because I think in Valorant, it's a lot easier to, I don't want to say run gimmicks. It's such a, calling something a gimmick is a slippery slope, and I've done it before and I regret it. But in Counter-Strike, I feel like there's not really very many gimmicks. But in Valorant, there's a lot more. So I think if you figure out what teams are doing, what their like tricky trap plays are, it's very easy to play against. But they could obviously just change their comp. So that's like the one caveat is like if they're ahead of the game, they would just change their comp and they would have new tricks and traps and you wouldn't know what to do. That is hard to do. I don't know that there's very many teams in the world that could even do that. So
yeah, they've I feel like unapologetically really tried to see their vision, like manifest their vision of how they think the game should work for their players and their team. And they did that so well because like even with the Sova example there, like people weren't really playing Sova on Fracture at all. Like that, like they that was like their thing, and it's something that I know a lot of people are like, oh, this is garbage. Like that you would actually play this comp, and obviously they make it look amazing because that's the funny thing is like Valorant is so interesting in this way because it's so similar but so different to CS. Because in CS, like the fundamentals are like really, really important. It's probably one of the reasons why Ethan is like, if I was to think of like what is a word that I could, use to describe Ethan, just one word, I'd probably pick fundamentals because I think he is a master of the fundamentals in a way that is, I think, beautiful. It's like you were talking about when you were talking about Astralis, because in that dominant Astralis era, so many people were like, oh, this is so boring. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. so it's like, it just depends on what you, like how you understand what you can see in the game. As I think that would, because how can you not be so utterly impressed by how incredibly refined everything Ethan does is? Like everything, so refined. It's beautiful. beautiful. It's like, you know, if like some master swordsmith just you know showed you this blade that he's been like, you know, folding and folding and folding for like, you know, 10 years or something, and finally unveils it to you. It's like, it's like a sword. There's other swords, but this is like been refined with so much careful, meticulous work over time and there's no other sword that's going to be as sharp or as efficient as that one. So that's kind of how I feel about Ethan.
We're glazing Ethan off.
Yeah, it's good because we also had to cut him as well because he was on that original 100 Thieves roster when Sean and I came in, and Mike's, and that was like a really hard choice actually, because you know, it's all the stuff that you said was obvious, but it also felt obvious at the time that the way that we wanted to build a team, that it wasn't probably going to be an immediate like fit that would have maybe made him happy, and also I think maybe made some of the players that we were going with, or like that vibe, like that would have worked so well. And maybe we would have been completely wrong. It's like hard to say, but that's just kind of the read that we had at the time, even though we knew as an exceptional player. So it's like, that's like one of those hard things, because you're talking about intangibles in these team environments. And I think that's like some of the things we're talking about. Like, how did EG achieve what they achieved? Well, there's all these intangibles. It's like, you can't just look at a player on a stat sheet and understand the value in a system. Like when you're talking about Astralis Era and all of the quality of the players and how good they were. Like, they were elevated so much like I think the EG players were elevated by all of the things that were working on the team. So they all look like way better than they maybe would be on any other team because of what they built over time. And I think that's also like circling it back to what you were talking about what you love about being on a, you know, what you love so much about being on a team is like solving problems together. Like, you're building this like product, this like thing, this like living entity together, which is the team. That is, you're all working on it. It's like a relationship. It's like, I often look at relationships where I was like, okay, yeah, there's two individuals, but like you're birthing something completely new. It's its own entity, the relationship, and you're both investing into it and you're solving problems. And now this relationship this thing is like taking on its own life and becoming its own thing. And if you take out any of those pieces, you can't. They're not interchangeable. So kind of jumping around on the ideas there, but I feel like it kind of ties in, and that is such a beautiful thing when you're on a team and it feels like everyone gets better just for being on the team.
100%. And there is no better feeling, like you said, of like everyone coming together for one singular goal, and that's to win, you know. And you, day in, day out, you're playing, you're studying with your team, and then you create these actionable steps to get better, and then you see it work in real time. It's like, oh, I don't know, I don't know, maybe it's a competitor thing. I don't know, but that feeling is just like, it's unmatched. And I realized I missed it so much when I was gone for that year, because I was just like, man, like I'm missing something. Like, I've been doing this I've been doing this since I was 14, and then I stopped for a year, and I felt like I was lost. I was like, what is the point of living? Like, I'm not doing anything. And I wanted that back. I want that feeling of like, obviously it's work, and sometimes it's not fun, you know, admittedly, sometimes it's not, but that feeling of when everything comes together and all of you share in like the excitement, the exuberation, you know, it's just like, I don't know. I miss it. And I think,
feel you.
yeah, I know you feel me, because you have been a part of esports as well. You know what's up.
Yeah, we've been although I was playing Quake in the early days, we've definitely been around. I mean, I've been around since like 2000, so yeah, it's funny actually. I went like full on like grandpa mode on a friend the other, like I think like a couple nights ago, where it's just like someone that you know, I met playing Valorant, and he's like in our friend group now, and he's like this he's like in his early 20s and or early mid 20s, and I was just like started just telling him just like without, any consent on his part. I just started telling him all these, like, when I was like on this team and like what we were, what we were doing, like how we like, achieved success. Like this is like the goal we set out, and then this is what happened, and then that's what happened on this team. And then I started talking about like other like team experience I had. And like, I just realized I'm just like basically desperately missing that same thing you're describing, and I'm just trying to like relive it through retelling it through to this person who just does. I mean, maybe he cares, I don't know. I don't think I cared if he cared at that point, and that's what I realized afterwards. I was like, oh, I feel bad. I feel like just subjecting this person to this. But it reminds me now, like, people like tell, like, that's like I said, like, grandpa mode, because now I understand. I like get it now, like when like older people will be like just regaling stories of the past. That's crazy. Yeah.
I do want to say though, like the mental fortitude required in order to be a competitive gamer in a 1v1 game like Quake, that is like, you have to have some insane resiliency. Because in a team game, I mean, I've done it. Shameful as it is, I've just blamed my teammates. Like, obviously not publicly, but privately after a game that we lost, I'm like, dude, man, this fucking guy threw the game. He played so bad. Like, I would just make excuses for like my own performance to be, I'd blame it on someone else. But in a 1v1 game, you can't do that. You have to be so like mentally strong in order to play a 1v1 competitive game at the highest level. So I have utmost respect for anyone who played like Quake, like you, StarCraft, games like that. That's crazy.
Oh my god, yeah. This is actually it's really interesting because there's not many 1v1 FPS games you could even. Well, there isn't any now.
There isn't,
I guess, apart from Quake. So like, yeah, a lot of people don't necessarily have that experience where. Because I always preferred team modes. That was like what I was ultimately better at, but I dueled because there was competitions for it and it was another way to just compete. And so I got pretty good at that. And I totally agree. Like the mental battle there is insane because when you make a mistake, especially in Quake, because there's so little variance. There's almost no variance in Quake at all. So it's not like you can somehow luck your way to something. Like, you have to like, you make the mistake and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, now I have to deal with this. Like I gotta like spend the next couple of minutes like skulking around the map and just like being in a really shit spot to maybe get like one chance at maybe getting back into the game. And if that doesn't work, I'm probably fucked. And then maybe if it doesn't work, you have to like, you're fucked, but you can't like think like that. You can't give up on yourself. And I was talking to, I've interviewed Rafa a few times, and for those of you that don't know who Rafa is, he's like the greatest
legend
1v1 Quake player of all time. Like he's an unbelievable competitor. He's so amazing, and I've been fortunate enough to be friends with him for a long time now. And in a couple of the podcasts that I did with him, like we just invariably always talk about the mental aspects, and he was sharing how important it is to not give up on yourself. And I hadn't even thought about it in as much as I feel like I should have done, because there are so many little ways that we give up on ourselves that it's hard to detect. And I think in talking to him about it, like I started to realize to realize like how easy it is to allow the cracks to start to form in your mind when you're playing these games, how the little frustrations can start to distract you and take your focus away, how it can be hard to recenter or reground yourself so that you don't have this like level of emotional reactivity to something just happened. How you need to, because whenever we make a play, like we visualize what we're doing ahead of time. Obviously we have to, it's I'm going to do this, I'm going to shoot this, I'm going to go run over there, I'm going to kill this guy, all these different things, and I've got this timing. So you've got this thing that you've done in your head. This is my play, and this is like the best possible answer that you have for that moment, and so you try to execute it. And sometimes like something goes wrong, or like the equation changes a little bit, but you might be a bit attached mentally to that play, so you'll still do it anyway, even at a point where maybe you could have like backed off and picked another spot. But like, there's always like small little like emotional attachments and stuff that like we get that's like that's a leak in your performance. You made the wrong choice, but it's because you're emotionally affected. Like there's so many things like mentally that are happening, and you like look around and it's like there's no one to blame. Like you're the reason why you lose. You're the reason why you're not good enough. It's not like bringing the relationship thing in again. It's like, in a relationship, we all know that probably someone is to fault for something, like in some cases, but you always use the we, and you never blame, because it's unproductive to do so. But like, dude, when it's just you're like blaming yourself a lot. Like you feel like shit a lot.
I feel like you just described IGLing, which is so funny.
Oh, I guess that is a different dynamic. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, talk to me
Yeah,
about IGLing then.
because I
Because
was
you switched into it,
never.
right, for a short period of time, like in Valorant, like you started IGLing. Because I know, like on
Yeah,
the TSM and maybe even on CLG and CS in the past, maybe there was like some times when you tried it out.
yeah. I was never an IGL. I was always like a secondary IGL. I was always very vocal and I had ideas, but I wasn't the kind of player that had like an idea every round. That was never me. I was always good at like collecting data through the game
Yeah.
and then coming up with like a plan to abuse this like certain thing that's happening or I think that's happening. So I was really good at that, but I switched to IGLing on CLG towards the end. This is actually when we picked up Ethan and Sabrosa in 2016. That's when I switched to IGL, and PETA suggested it because I was always very vocal. Um, and so I switched into it, and a lot of what you were saying is just like that is the mindset of an IGL. It's you sometimes you get married to these ideas because everyone on the team's relying on you and you don't want to, if you make a change mid round, it can cause it, it can cause more mistakes on your teammates than if you just go with the initial idea that everyone understands. And so sometimes I wouldn't change the call, even though like subconsciously I'm like, I should change this. This is not a good idea. But if I change it, we're gonna be confused, we're gonna make more mistakes, and we're gonna lose anyway. So why not just everyone be on the same page and maybe we can still scrap it out and win the round. And like I said, I'm not a natural IGL. It's something I kind of just fell into. I don't think I'm particularly great at it, but it was the mental warfare that was going on with myself the whole time IGLing is so similar to what you're describing with like Rafa and the 1v1 and you experienced as well in Quake. There's cracks are everywhere. You're constantly getting cracks and every time you think of like an idea, you're like, oh, but what if they do this? Oh, that's not good. So you're constantly like in this battle of self-doubt of whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea. And even like good ideas, when they fail, you're like, was it a good idea? And you have to like go and review it and try and but in the moment you can't review it. So you're like, oh, was that actually a bad call? You just don't know. And so you need this like unwavering confidence as an IGL. And I wouldn't say I had that. And that was definitely my weak point. I didn't have unwavering confidence in everything that I was calling. Sometimes I did. Sam put it in a very good way. Whenever we were like boot camping one time on NRG, sometimes he would notice that like I'm in the zone. When I'm in the zone, I'm I want to say I'm micromanaging everyone, but like I know immediately at the start of the round what I want to do. I explain it pretty clearly, and I like when someone suggests an idea, I'm like, no, trust me, this is what I want to do. Like he could recognize when I was in the zone, and it didn't happen that often. If it happened more often, we'd have been a better team. No question. No question. But sometimes I'd enter this zone where I knew exactly what I wanted to do every time. And maybe it didn't always work, but it didn't like shake my confidence. I still knew what I wanted to do, even like the next round. Um, I couldn't tap into that all the time, but I think the best IGLs can. I think obviously I played with Pujon for a long FNS for a really long time. I've known Pujon since like 2010, I think, or 2009 maybe. And so we've been playing CS together for a long time, and he's the first like real IGL I ever played with. And to this day, I still think I think he's one of the best IGLs in the world. And people like to shit on him because individually he didn't, have good stats or whatever. But I can tell you that whenever I played with Pujon, when he was my IGL, I've never had more confidence in what I was doing than when I made my own decisions. When he told me to do something, I knew it's because he had whatever he was thinking for me to do fit within the team, and he knew what he was doing, and it was a good read. I just he never like questioned what he did. He always had confidence, and so I have the utmost respect for him, and I miss playing with a player like that. I was like, yeah, I don't care if you get 5 kills or 20 kills. If you're my IGL and you have that kind of confidence, you're gonna bring value to the team. Um, but yeah, it to wrap this up though, like the cracks over time culminated in a breaking at the end, and I broke at the end of TSM. So that's when I knew it was time to hang it up.
Yeah, it's hard, especially if we talked about with the GMing thing. Like, I think kind of if you zoom out of like what the life is like for a competitive player, like these days in a circuit, you're kind of just like going. There's not like a lot of time to like sit down and be like, okay, well, what am I actually doing right now? Like, how am I actually feeling right now? Like, how is how am I affecting people around me? Like all of these things. Like, it's hard to be in that place unless you've got some kind of system in the team that helps the players and people to kind of be able to do that. Like we put that in. We tried to put that in with 100 Thieves, but it's also like harder said than, or easier said than done, just because also younger players, just because like everybody, like you're going to be less experienced with your own inner emotional landscape, so you won't even probably. Some people will be better than others to like understand their feelings, because some people like
100%.
It's like you're saying like you were acting towards people in ways that maybe they didn't deserve or whatever. Like you've got feelings that are coming from somewhere, but you've just been on the grind, so you didn't might not be sure exactly where, and then it comes out in like some way. Or like like this is like very common that for younger people, like acting out, like they do stupid shit. It's like hard to see like where the connection is. Like why would you do this? It's like, well, it's actually because of some other way that they feel that that. So it's hard to have that awareness. So in the first place, like it's 100%. So difficult, dude.
I think a lot of that comes down to maturity, getting older, because I didn't think I was necessarily a bad teammate until I was older. And then I would like reflected on some of the things I did over my career, and I'm like, I was a child. What was wrong with me? Why would I do that? Like, how does that help the team? Yeah, it's maturity, I'd say, a little bit. Yeah, getting older, you reflect. It gives you, I think you appreciate reflecting on your actions more.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you're just always in the moment. You're just, you don't think about that stuff. It's cringe.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Like the whole mental battle is. I do agree with you. I think just for esports athletes in general, it's such a big deal. Like there was actually a clip a while ago, funnily enough, where Jake Lucky was talking to like Shaquille O'Neal or something in some interview, and I don't know, the topic came up of like is like esports, can they be like called athletes? Like just something of that notion. And Shaq's point was essentially like your careers are like basically as short as like an NBA career, like 5-6 years, like it's and what you do is like from the point of view of like the execution and stuff, that's not necessarily like physically, that's not necessarily that like super demanding, but it still seems like the mental battle like that you would go through in having such a short career, such a competitive career, and just the nature of what you're doing, that is in of itself extremely difficult, and that is something that all athletics shares. So he's like, by that sort of definition, I feel like, yeah, absolutely, like these are athletes. And I think it's true, and I think that it's hard to understand necessarily the toll that it might take. It's like very hard to understand that, and it's hard for people to deal with it when they're all young, like you're saying, and they don't have that maturity or experience to be able to kind of figure out like what's going on. Because I think that there are players that they go through that first phase of their career where they get really good from a young age, and they're grinding, they haven't stopped playing, and they maybe get to like the pro level like pretty quickly. It happens to a lot of people. Then they get to that spot where they start to like experience difficulty with their performance because they kind of don't even know how they got that good. And then so they don't even know like how to solve the problems now that they're struggling. And then also like all the emotional stuff has like never been addressed or dealt with. And so there's like this moment when you have to kind of like have this existential crisis and then kind of figure some shit out about yourself a little bit to kind of reorient yourself, recenter yourself on like what you're doing and kind of like get your perspective like sorted out, like all these things. I've seen a lot of players go through that kind of cycle and then kind of come back like stronger. But it's interesting.
And that happens across all sports for sure. To your point though, it's like I think in esports it's only slightly different because you can technically be a professional at like 16 in esports, and it's a young man's game. Like that's, let's just call it what it is. It's a young man's game. Okay, if you're in your 30s, you're pretty much doomed. But it just the threshold for age I feel like just keeps getting lower and lower. Like now, like there's professional players being scouted at like 16, 15, 14. Like the more it's becoming like ingrained in culture, in modern culture, it's younger and younger and younger. And obviously they're like underdeveloped, like both physically and mentally, and they're just not ready for that kind of pressure. And it's going to affect people in different ways. So yeah, it's very scary. Because I'm trying to imagine at 16, I went to my first major LAN. And I mean, I wasn't like that good. I was just doing it mainly for fun. I just thought it was a fun thing to do. I didn't really ever consider making it a career or anything. And it was mentally stressful, dude. I was like, I got a bunch of people standing behind me watching me, and like I was like very nervous. I had people, the other teams like yelling at me. I'm like, I'm a kid. Why are you yelling at me? Like, you can't really do that nowadays, I guess. Like you kind of get, your hand swatted by Riot if you do stuff like that. But yeah, there's a mental burden that's put on a lot of these players that is, it needs to be. I mean, I feel like the community needs to do a better job. Like, they will ruthlessly attack kids, and
that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
they're ruthless, and I'm just like, guys, I get if you attack me, I'm an adult. That's fine. Like I can't always handle it, but I can definitely handle it better than like a 16-year-old or even like an 18-year-old. It's like, cut them a little slack. Like talk some shit when they turn 21. All right. Once they turn 21, like, you can go in, you could be more ruthless, but don't attack these kids. Cause you don't know
when they get to the legal drinking age. They
they
got some help.
Hey, you got to choose a number. And I feel like 21's a good one. No, you can do everything at 21, but you don't know how it's going to affect them. And I can tell you, at least from my experience, if I was under the scrutiny that I was, in my late 20s, early 30s as a pro, if I felt that when I was a teen, that amount of negativity that I would read about me sometimes, I don't know if I'd have been able to handle that just straight up. I don't know. I don't know how kids do it. Like, I don't know how. How old's Oxy? He just turned like 17?
17, 18, yeah.
18, something like that?
He's really young. It's one of the two, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, like if he has a bad game, if I read some of the stuff people say, I don't know how to handle that,
Yeah, it's weird. We're living in like really weird times in just the sense that just how much communication is done online and through social media and stuff. Like I didn't get smartphones didn't become a thing till like what, 2008, 2007-ish. That's when the first iPhone came out, I think. And so at that point I'd already been to like international LANs and stuff. Like, I'd managed to, we grew up in an era where people didn't have phones from a really young age. So I don't even really understand like how this stuff affects people, because I kind of get the sense that, your online kind of presence has more weight. So if people are like attacking you, that I almost feel like it stands to reason that for someone that has grown up with having some of it, like an online presence and that online status almost, that like, imagine if someone like deleted you from the internet, like, you're still in real life, you can still go and talk to people. Imagine like all your accounts were like nuked and deleted and you couldn't participate in anything online anymore. That's kind of like a death like you're just actually kind of dying in a way,
Yeah.
right? Because like so much of who we are is now this online avatar, this online presence we have through like social media and stuff, and like everything we're doing is like validated by other people, and like all of the ways the algorithms and everything work is kind of dictating our behavior to a large extent and how we interact with these platforms. So I mean, all this is to say, I have no idea how this is all affecting people these days, but it definitely can't be helpful. But also, how can you really avoid it at the same time? It's one of those interesting things that like let's say if you're a child actor, or if you're a if you really find success really at anything at a young age, it's always very difficult for those people, like if they don't have good support around them, to be able to deal with the attention. Because I think you're right, like you're just not really, if you get thrust into fame, it's not really built, no one's really built for that, I would say. It's not
100%.
natural. It's not like a normal thing, right? It's weird.
Yeah, no one is ready for that. No one's ready to see, threads made about you where they, scrutinize your every decision in a game, and then they'll even go beyond that, like scrutinize you outside of the game. You're like, oh, he hasn't been playing as much as he needs to, or like, he's on stream and he said this. It's just like, I don't know. We encourage the players and the youth to like, we encourage players. I'm not gonna say youth. We encourage players who happen to be young to, to progress their career through not only just their gameplay, but through social media, and try and leverage that to, build a following so that they can make more money, etc., get sponsors, etc. But I think ultimately it's detrimental to the mental health of the players. I was talking to one of my buddies about social media. I'm, going a little off course here, but I was talking to one of my buddies about he has, a bunch of kids now, and we were talking about social media and the way it's affected me and some of the stuff I've read, and I've kind of become like disillusioned with social media and online internet culture. It's something I used to love and like identify with. Now I don't even recognize it in some sense. Like it's so different from what I grew up with, and it's become so like vitriolic, and it's like you always have to take a side, and it's an echo chamber. You can't really have a discussion anymore. And I was like, if I had kids, I would never want them on social media, honestly. And he has taken actionable steps to actually do that. He's like, yeah, my kids aren't going to get on social media like at all. And, maybe, he said until maybe they're like young adults. So like, 16, 17, 18, in their late teens, something like that, he'll allow it. But he was like, they're not getting on social media at all because it's so, the best word that I can think of is vitriolic, honestly.
Yeah.
I can't stand it.
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here, because maybe this would be one way to put it, like from a perspective of like, because if you have a parent, parents, duty of care is to ensure like the best quality of life for their child, and to like obviously make sure that their child is like supported, taken care of, all of these different things. And obviously people might look at me like, oh, this is a very very controlling thing. The whole culture revolves around social media, so just taking that out of the kids, like like forcibly like saying this is not something you're able to do. A lot of people might be look at that pretty negatively because of how they're unable to participate in something everybody else is able to participate in, and maybe they'll see it as too draconian. But I almost feel like we don't know all of the ways that it's impacting people. Obviously, I mean that's we're like living through the experiment now and getting the data over time. But I think there's like enough at this point too to make the case that there's definitely a lot of negative outcomes, such as like your whole reward system. It gets is getting reprogrammed. I was kind of touching on that earlier. Just the whole way that your dopaminergic system works is all, your body can't do anything without dopamine, and dopamine is it's like one of the reward systems, and allows you to motivate yourself to do things, to accomplish things, and all the rest of it. You've got something that is designed to to essentially just trigger as much as possible in certain ways to make you as addicted to spending time on the platforms as possible. And so you're you're having these things kind of essentially reprogram your brain chemistry effectively, and in such a way that it will impact your productivity as a human being and the ways that you spend your time. And so that it's probably a very negative outcome actually for young people especially. And I would liken it to something like, as a parent, like, would you, just because the kid wants all of the junk foods, they might not care in the moment, but when they're like 18 to 20 and they're like obese, they are going to care. And I wonder, because I've seen a lot of people talking about this now, like people in the Gen Z generation, like teenagers who are like, I can kind of see how this is kind of fucking me up a bit, like, so and there's definitely a lot more data coming out about like mental health outcomes and all the rest of it. So it is definitely it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
100%.
I think to an extent though, like I don't know if you experienced this, but when I was coming up as a player, like I got lots of shit from other players, and like people were like talking shit about me, but mostly because it was all related to for me mostly to because I was having a lot of success quickly, and there's a lot of other players that didn't like that. I was like, why is he getting on these like better teams when I've been like playing longer, like whatever it is, like stuff like that. So then I have people that are sort of like talking shit and like spreading rumors and all this kind of stuff, and I can only imagine like if you amplify like the amplification of like today's like social media environment where the entire pro scene is like a Big Brother house almost. Right, where like it's like this reality TV house, like they're all characters. And I talked to Vanity about this, where it's like, how do you feel like being a part of this almost like theater where everyone's watching reality TV, and that's what the pro scene is, because it's all the drama. Everyone's all got I turn when is this guy turning his stream on? Like, what is he saying about this other team or player? Like it's like this drama that everyone's really invested in between all these like relationships of the pro scene, and it's super interesting actually. It's completely different to like before, it's like you were trying to show as little as your gameplay as possible, and now like you're saying, you're incentivized to stream, and you're kind of almost unknowingly a part of this reality TV show. I feel like, I don't know if that's a weird way to put it. I don't know.
I think you're so on point. You said theater. It is actually a play. We have become this show that people watch, and that's what drives views. Honestly, as sad as it is, it's less about the competition, I think, and more about the drama that's built to support the competition. I think it is very negative. And one thing you mentioned was like when players shit talk each other or like banter between each other, like I had players, I mean, I can tell you straight away, when I was coming up in CS, I had Simphus talk so much trash to me in scrims. It was clockwork. We'd scrim against whatever team Corey was on. He would talk so much trash to me because I was unknown. And I was playing, I had the most insane confidence. I was just running around the map, killing people. And he was like, I can't wait to see this on LAN. You're so bad. Like, well, he would say a lot of stuff to me in scrims. And it never affected me. I thought it was funny because as a competitor, I get what's happening. Like me and him, we're going at each other. We're both competitors. That's not a problem. But what bothered me was seeing like a Twitter post about me. Like I'd refresh my notifications and someone tweets at me saying I'm garbage, blah, blah. Like some guy who's not competing, he's not in the same space I am. He's not, going through the same struggles I'm going through. And instead he's just from the outside looking in, doesn't know what's happening. And he just sees a bad stat line and he's just going at me. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, why do you go on your way to trash talk me? And at first, it doesn't affect me. The first, I'd say 4 or 5 years, it didn't bother me at all. But it's a slow erosion, and over time, it got to me more and more, and eventually, it got to the point where I was like, I can't do this social media stuff anymore. Like, I can't do it, and I don't want to be a part of this manufactured drama machine anymore. I just want to play the game. I want to keep it pure. Like, I don't really talk trash to anyone anymore. I just don't want to be a part of that. But yeah, at the start, I feel like okay, to tie it all back, like how's it negatively impacting players? I think it's a slow erosion on the players. They might not think it affects them now, especially when they're young, but over time, from my experience, it slowly but surely chips away at your confidence. And I've noticed it in myself when I was first even when I was really young, but even when I was first turn pro, I was supremely confident in almost everything I did. Like I trusted my intuition every time. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. It's what I believe is the right play. And even if my teammate was like, I don't think you should have done that, or even said it in a non-constructive way, I still had confidence in what I thought was right, and I would take their advice sometimes. I'd be like, okay. But over time, I noticed like my confidence was just gone completely, because I almost at one point got afraid of making a mistake because of the backlash I'd get on social media over it, instead of from my teammates. Like, I was more afraid of what people said on social media, and that's not good.
Yeah, that's definitely not a good place to be. Yeah, it's
That's the
quite a
death
few.
of a player.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it ties right back into the Rafa stuff about like giving up on yourself. Like people don't. I feel like it's hard to understand how hard it is to maintain that frame, because it's not just it's not what you think in a way. Because it's not giving up on yourself. Is also having maximal belief in yourself. So if you feel any moment in the game where you don't have maximum belief in yourself, you're giving up on yourself. And that's kind of what I realized with the Rafa thing. It's not like that moment when you're like, oh, I've lost. No, it's all the like small moments where that confidence wavers because you don't have full belief in yourself. So finding a way to maintain that frame, because whenever sometimes I think this is like a useful tool in terms of like performance, is sometimes to like, okay, look at how we are when we are playing our absolute best. We're in the zone, we're in a flow state, we're on like our A+ game. Like how, like what, okay, what's going on? Okay, let's like freeze frame it. Okay, how am I feeling? Like what's going through my mind? Like what are all the things that are happening? And one of those things is absolute confidence and belief in yourself. And if you're playing in your like, B game or C game, there's obviously the hesitation. Like you just don't feel like there's this feeling that you just don't have, that, yeah, you might rationally know what the play is, but for some reason it just doesn't feel the same way. Even though if you have like a feeling, oh, I've got the timing and this is the play to make, there's just something that shouldn't be there, that's in there somewhere, that's making it not feel right. And that is like the thing that you got to like work out sometimes as a player, like to get your quote unquote confidence back. Because I think confidence comes from a bunch of different places, but that's, for me, the interpretation I have. And like if you're like affected by stuff, and in that way that where you're thinking about social media and stuff, that is so ultimately just incredibly just distracting and terrible. And I'm sure it's connected to the fact that maybe if you've been playing or having some worse results, you're already having that mental battle with yourself. And so now you've got these extra eyes that are also looking at you and also judging you, and you already feel fucking bad. It's like when people like give you shit for something and you're like, you can give me as much shit as you want, I already feel worse than you could ever make me feel. It's kind of like, it reminds me of that situation. It's like, just don't even bother. Like I gotta fix it, I gotta figure it out, but I already feel like shit. I know.
Yeah.
I'm my own harshest critic.
And it's funny because I think the upside of being in a team game versus a solo game is like when you start to doubt yourself. If you are playing with a team that like are really good friends and you all believe in each other, you luckily can fall back on them, and like they can pick you back up, or they can take the reins and be like, don't worry, we got you this game. But you can't do that in a 1v1 game.
Yeah.
It's just all you. So you're on your own. But yeah, that's what I like the most about a team game is you can't, we're not going to be 100% all the time. I mean, I don't, well, Rafa can. I don't know how he did it, but
yeah, he's amazing. He's so special.
he's amazing.
I tried to get him to join 100 Thieves like multiple times because he was like considering a career pivot. And I'm like, nobody knows how to win more than this human. Like this human understands how to win. I don't give a fuck if he knows anything about Valorant. If I get him on the team, like he will help the team win. It's like,
yeah.
So sorry, just to like to derail you there for a second.
No, do you think Rafa would be a good like sports psychologist?
I think he'd be a really good performance coach. I think he'd be really good
Okay.
at understanding like how to look at a team, how to look at players, and how they are taking their own development, as well as just looking at team dynamics. I think he'd be very good at optimizing it in a way that, because this is the other thing, players need to be able to respect they need to be able to respect who they're getting their information from, and that's like huge. That's a huge barrier. So if you don't have some like, I feel like Raph is the kind of player that I could say to somebody that's a completely like, 17-year-old, has no idea about esports, but it's like a really good Valorant player. And I can say, look, this guy has won more fucking trophies than anyone in fucking FPS esports. You are listening to him. And he would be like, salute me. Yes, sir. I will listen to it. I will listen to him and trust what he says. Because that's the barrier. That's the big barrier for people to coaching, actually. It's like, can you get a coach that other players will respect? Because if you can't, then it's like dead on arrival.
So I'm going to tie this back into you being a GM. So you were saying that you were trying to implement systems, but I don't know whether or not, I don't remember you said whether or not they worked, but was a struggle that like maybe the players to the coach to you, was there a disconnect along that line with like the systems you want to put in, or how did that work? What was the issue there?
I think,
was it a matter of respect? Did they was the respect given all the way up the chain, or was it disconnected somewhere?
I think generally yes. I think respect for. I think though the issue, one of the bigger issues is that I think that the role between the head coach and the players is more critical because of how day to day it is. So although I can bring stuff in, I'm not going to be necessarily the person executing it myself. So it will instead come through other people because I think effectively, like with the GM, you're not necessarily like, typically you don't have like a super hands-on role, like being in front of the players. You're trying to be operating and observing behind the scenes and helping to make sure that the head coach is in a system that you think makes sense, and that whatever their responsibilities are, that they are performing that job well. And if they're not, then you can step in to kind of help solve it. I feel like it's kind of like you're the CEO of the team in a sense, where you want to have an understanding of kind of everything, and you want to be able to kind of dip in and do a bit of everything if necessary. If there's a hole or a gap, then you can fill it. But generally, ideally, you want to be setting everybody else up to be taking on those roles and succeeding. And so my interactions with the players wasn't really going to be large. I mean, sometimes I like stepped in like on the LCQ in 2022. I tried to do like I try to give the team like a mental tool, reframing tool to help them, because we had like a huge collapse against FaZe and that LCQ where it happened twice. There was like some kind of like somewhat of a mental block where like Baby Bay caught everybody walking up cat a little bit too slow, and he's in a spot that someone should have checked, and then he like sprays everybody down, and then suddenly that compounds into like bigger mistakes because everyone feels like really shitty about that, and that had happened like a couple times against FaZe in particular. And that was like how we ended up like losing this match, and then we had like a 2 or 3 day break between that and then playing against Sentinels, and then sort of having the run. I think it was like Sentinels and then Cloud9, and then I think am I missing someone? Was another team, and then eventually the Guard in the finals. So I like gave them a mental tool, but that was like few and far between. I didn't generally step in to do what I feel like there would be the job of either the head coach or a member of the performance staff, because I was fortunate enough that like for because that's the other thing too, is like, what is the relationship supposed to look like between you and the player, and I feel like it's important to make sure there are clear lines between your role and the other roles, so you're not kind of stepping into the territory where like, oh, now the head coach feels like I'm kind of coaching a bit, when maybe that wasn't really the understanding, or like there are some performance coaches, but I'm giving some like sports psychology stuff to the team, when maybe we've got a guy for that, and that's kind of his job. So your job is really to put all of these people, like to know which of these people you need to like orient them in a system that you think is going to work, and then sort of like let them go and then have it be monitored by you, so you can optimize it over time. So I didn't really have that kind of relationship with players. It's kind of a long way to kind of answer your question, I would say. But so I didn't really run into that problem too much. this is actually why I think Sean worked so well on that team in 2022, because he had obviously, I don't think you could really have put someone in a head coach position that would have more respect from their players than someone like Sean Gares. So,
Right.
and that went a long way, because actually it was the case that Stella didn't really like, I think, agree with the vision, if I remember correctly, of what Sean was wanting. But because he respected Sean so much, it like actually just didn't matter. Like he just bought in completely. But I feel like if that was almost any other coach, I thought that probably wouldn't have happened. And I think that the buy-in wouldn't have been strong enough to overcome the disparity between visions of how the game should be played. But because Stella did fully buy in, the team worked extremely well. Like when it started to get going, it was like one of the best teams. Like by the end of the year, top 8 team in the world for sure, I think. So Sean was pretty magical, I think.
No, yeah, he's incredible, dude. I have so much respect for Sean. You know, I don't want to say I look up to him, because technically it was like he was pro before me, obviously, but he was someone I remember on an ESEA thread. This was so long ago, way before I was pro. I remember I watched him play in like an invite match or something, and I was like, this guy's gonna be the next like fraud. I was like, he is the next big opper of America. He's gonna take over, dude. I was gassing him up so hard. And I didn't even realize he was an IGL. I had no clue. And so that when I found out he was an IGL, I just got the utmost respect for him. Yeah, he puts in the work. All of his analysis. If you're a player and if you don't respect someone who puts in the work that he does, or like any IGL does, you are doomed, dude. You have no idea what they're doing to help the team. You're just sitting there like doing aim training and like getting on and fragging. It's like, no, man, you don't get it. You need to have respect for players like Sean.
Yeah, there's not that many of them for sure. Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because you were talking about like how Semphis was giving you shit. Going back to that for a second, and it reminded me of like, what I find, because like I said earlier, like at heart I feel like I'm a competitor. That's how I identify, and I feel like the most beautiful thing about being a competitor is this dynamic that you have in your pursuit of mastery of something. That's already, I love like mastery of things. I think it's really interesting. And then you get this extra element where you get this other person that you're trying to beat. And that is kind of the measure of your mastery is how much better, or how many people can you beat until there's no one left to beat, type of thing. And so then you get to this, you're doing this like really hard thing. And the only person that can really understand your sort of trials and tribulations is is your enemy, is the person also trying to do the same thing. So they're like enemies on the server, but at the same time, there is this like beautiful respect, because you're each helping each other on the path by showing each other each other's respective weaknesses. So even though you're my enemy, you are my greatest friend, because through you, I am able to get to where I want to go. And I always found that was like very poetic about competition, and the fact that like Semphis is giving you shit, but you can kind of still like respect in a way like that this is competition. This is like where he's, that's what that is. It's like part of it. Kind of almost feels like a playful hazing almost, when you're like, entering some kind of like brotherhood or some kind of like, it's like hazing. Whereas, then you switch and the person on social media giving you shit. It's like, are you familiar with that Theodore Roosevelt quote, like the man in the arena?
I'm not.
Okay, I'll read this one for you. I think you'll like this one. I actually read this out when Automatic was on the podcast too, because I think we had like some similar topic. But all right, so the man in the arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Damn, yeah. Critics just got put on blast. Oh my god.
So that's like the feeling you're describing. That's why you can't tolerate the people that are like giving you shit, that are like the random no-name people on social media, because they are not in the arena. They're just like the critics. They're just they don't know the shit that you've been through. But the but a Semphis will, or like there's a club, you belong to a club, you belong to a specific club of the people that tried to walk the same path that you did, and that's a special thing, I think.
I like to think so. I'd like to think what I've done is, special in my own right. Yeah, it is a club, and it's what I missed over the last year when I was gone. I was like, dude, I want to be in the club still. Like these are my homies.
Yeah.
These are my people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Corey, it's he was, it was like playful banter, but there was like in a way he was kind of telling me what I was doing was not productive within the practice. I'd like push a smoke and catch someone off guard. And in a match, you can do that. And it's, if you hit the timing, if your intuition is saying it's a good play and you do it and it works, it's like, those are the kind of plays that can win your team games, especially in crucial rounds. But in practice, that's not really what you want to be doing. In practice, you want to be testing like setups and strategies and stuff like that. You don't want to be going for game-winning plays because you're not trying to win. You're trying to, figure out what works and what doesn't work, what systems you can implement for your matches moving forward. So he didn't say it in a constructive way, but in a way, he was kind of coaching me if I really read between the lines. So that, yeah, like when someone talked trash to me in a server, I didn't take it at face value. I never did. Because it was like on some level, it's just banter. It's just, I'd give it back. I'd give it back to him too. Why not? Corey would talk shit to me and I'd be like, yeah, you're going to be my number one fan at LAN. Like, I'd say stuff like that. So yeah. But whenever someone does say, when someone says something on Twitter, it's hard to know if they're just a critic or if there's someone who did attempt to make it to the top. They put in the hours, but they just didn't make it. So it's, I do think in some cases, you got to tread lightly because you can't just dismiss everyone who's a critic online. Because, for every person who makes it to the pro level, there's like, 1,000, 10,000 people who didn't make it, and sometimes some of those players deserve to make it. Like skill wise, they could have been good enough, but there's like external factors that prevented them from making it. Maybe they're not, maybe like they didn't have a stable household, for example, or so, I don't want to get too dark on the subject, but there are factors that prevent people from making it undeservedly. So you definitely have to be careful, but I I don't think, even if you're one of those people, I don't think going on social media and lashing out at players about it is like ever the right thing to do, but
Yeah.
anyway,
yeah, it is funny how some people feel the need to do that. It's interesting. I don't personally understand fully what's at play there. There's obviously it's like you go into ranked and like the person that is presenting the most like strength is often the weakest person because it's like the person that's like they think that they stop trying because the team is losing and they basically blame other people and like pretend like they're cool. And it's like, actually, I see what's going on here. Like you actually can't handle losing. And so you're having to like, you're being a dickhead to people because you can't handle losing. But at the same time, you're like presenting that you're actually kind of cool and that other people have the problem. It's like interesting. And it's very interesting. Oh, what did you remind me of? Oh, I lost my train of thought. There's so much we're weaving all these different ideas together. It's great.
We're all over the place. I'm a well-documented yapper, dude. I jump from subject to subject. I'm all over the place whenever I talk about stuff.
No, I love it. I'm a big fan. No, it's interesting. It's definitely oh yeah. Okay, so what I was going to say was, okay, we talked earlier about how you through the course of like, you know, being a pro player and like being on teams and stuff, how it feels like you don't have much on the other end of it, but actually, oh, you kind of like passively picked up a lot of various skills and experiences that were useful. I think one of the biggest ones with competition is actually that process of not just getting beat, but also having to deal with like people talking shit, because you're constantly, because what you just did was you're like, Semphis was giving me shit, but oh wait, even though it was perhaps unreasonable in certain respects, I got this value from it. And so you're able to like reflect and go through that process where you can filter it in that way. And at the same time, you're experiencing adversity and you're experiencing like this contentious environment and you're experiencing failure again and again. And I think that those experiences in competition are vital for people, because I feel like I'm seeing more and more people these days that really struggle with like they really struggle with their identity to a degree that you know, if someone insults them, it just rocks their world to a degree that's like really unhelpful for them. And it almost feels like they haven't been through that kind of competitive sporting environment where you get fucked up. Like, you know, you get fucked up, but you get humbled. You get humbled by losing. And you have, if you want to win, you have to ask yourself and be on. You have to be honest with yourself and be like, okay, where do I suck? Like why am I shit? You got to like face it. You got to face the like despair of how inadequate you are in that moment, because that's why you lost. You know, of course you're inadequate. You didn't win. You were inadequate. So you got to figure it out. And going through that process of like being broken by the world to then rebuild yourself is like so vitally important. It's like how, look at biology. Like our system is how do they, I think they call it like anti-fragile or something, is also something, I forget what like the definition is in biology, but like our immune system, the way that it works is it gets kind of like broken to get stronger. Like you get sick, and by getting sick, that's how you get stronger. Or, you know, our body has systems, and this is called like hormosis, is the effect where let's say you eat something that has like some kind of toxin in it, your body gets stressed out, and then it triggers like a genetic adaptation that then makes you a bit stronger. Which is actually how like eating your vegetables makes you better, because it actually makes your system stronger, because it triggers like these various like genetic like pathways, because eating the vegetables stresses your body out in a certain way that we can't detect. Or like why you go into a sauna, you experience something that's a very uncomfortable environment, and you get massive health benefits from it. Like we have to like go through like the stuff that fucks us up in some way or another to get better, to get stronger. And so if you don't have a capacity to do that, if you're not looking for that kind of stuff, discomfort in some way or another, or experiencing it in some way or another, and then not applying like you are like a good philosophy behind it, of like, okay, what can I learn from this? How does this make me better? How can I use this to my advantage, as opposed to being like, oh, the world is attacking me and I am a victim now. Like that, no, you can't get anywhere. You can't get anywhere by doing that. So I think sport is the thing that most naturally first teaches people to like get up again and like figure it out. I feel like. So yeah. I feel like that's what this does.
I agree completely. And you know, I don't want to get too like too deep into this, just because I mean this is a rabbit hole that could go forever.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna start sounding like a boomer, but I think your upbringing kind of plays into that as well. You know, I was lucky enough to be the baby in my family of 4 or 3 siblings. So 2 older brothers and an older sister. So I immediately, from the moment I was born, I was going to experience losing, because I was going to lose at everything I did, because I had 2 older brothers. So I think that helped big time moving forward. I just, you know, I got comfortable with it. I was like, okay, I lost. How did I lose? Let's get better. Obviously it frustrated me, but I think if you're like an only child and, you know, you grow up in maybe a family that pampers you a lot, you know, because you're an only child, that obviously this is not the case for every only child. Don't attack me. I'm saying this is a possibility. You don't really experience failure that often. And I think sport is a great way, as you said, to start experiencing that and become comfortable with it. But if you don't, you know, if you were like like I said, an only child who was kind of pampered and you never played any sports and you just got into, you know, competitive gaming, you're not going to be able to handle that well, especially in like ranked, you know, That's what I imagine when I run into some of these people in ranked.
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
get
yeah.
really mad. They've never played any sports in their life. They've never, had their parents yell at them for anything. They've never made, that's what I imagine. So I think I I only imagine that later on in life. I'd say in my late 20s, early 30s, I started to, I used to get really mad at people who played like that. I'd, you know, talk a lot of shit to them, degrade them in some ways, not proud of that, but now I'm more understanding. I'm like, okay, maybe they haven't matured enough yet.
Yeah, it is funny because I think that too in ranked, because people ask me something, oh, how are you like always so calm when you play ranked and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, I mean, firstly, you'll I'm sure you've been through this too, but like if you have played like competitively and you've played at like, serious competitions or the finals like at lands and stuff, playing online doesn't, I mean, it's just not, doesn't feel like anything, firstly. And then secondly, it would be pretty unbecoming to be like a 35-year-old that is like somehow like triggered by a fucking 15-year-old in ranks. Like what does that say
I
about me
know.
at that point? Like, fuck, dude. I can't let that happen. I can't allow that to happen.
Time to
So
get off the computer if that's happening, dude.
yes, dude, you're like allowing yourself to get bullied by strange teenagers online. It's just crazy. It's funny
Yeah.
though. But yeah, it is definitely like a really big deal because it's so important in your life to be able to figure shit out and to like not accept that things are as they are. Because the thing is, if you accept things that things are as they are, then let's say let's use that logic when you're like born, you don't know fucking anything. Like you learn shit over time, then you get to you're 10, you still don't know anything. Like you're shit at everything, you fucking suck at everything. Like there's got to be a point at which you're like, okay, I suck at everything. You got to acknowledge that. You got to be honest about that. You've got to be able to be honest about that, and you got to then be like, okay, I don't want to suck anymore, let me try this thing. Okay, I still suck at this thing. It's like everything is going to be like that because everything fucking is hard. It's like everything's hard.
Dude, everything's hard. It sucks.
Dude, even like running is hard. Like okay, you can get like reasonably
God.
decent running technique, with some practice and stuff, like decent enough. But like the actual thing of just running is like hard, or like writing is hard. Like all these skills are very basic, but if you want to do anything in life well, it is all hard, and it all requires you to like accept that you suck. And so I remember realizing this like when I was younger, because I think because of like competition, I became like really obsessed with like getting good at stuff and mastery and all this kind of thing. And I was like, okay, what are all the things I'm shit at? And I picked running actually, I think because that was one of the things I'm like, I'm really shit at running. I feel like this is kind of basic. I feel like I should at least have some confidence that I can like run, or like I know how to swim, or like I can do these like basic things and be able to be good at them. And so I went on a huge kind of like kick doing that when I was younger. But what I found was like, with the like bringing the kind of childhood thing into it a little bit, was that one of the ways sports really helped, or like the esports really helped me, was because I was in a pretty remote place, so I couldn't really play sports very effectively. So, but I had video games on the internet, and I had a lot of I definitely had like a rough time at home, let's say, and at school. And so the source of my self-esteem was beating people on the internet at a video game. And I got really, really good. And I was like, okay, no one can take this shit away from me, because like, if you have expertise in a skill or a job, there's like, there's lots of people that can maybe, get the job instead of you and these different things. But if you're beating everyone, you can join a server and you beat people, or like you go into the dojo and you like fuck people up, or like, you go anywhere competitive. That's so tangible, dude. It's like, no one can take that away from you. It's like, no one can take away from you that you're better than those other people, that you beat them. No one can argue. It's so clear. I love, that's one of the things that for me was so important, because when I grew up, I was like, I feel shit about myself, but I know that at least like I know that I'm super sick at Quake, even though no one in my school knows what the fuck this is. In fact, this is actually worsening the bullying. It's like
way worse back then.
Yeah, people used to call me Quake as like a nickname. I'm like, what the fuck? That's like, imagine if someone like when I see you call you Counter-Strike when you're like in school. That's so weird. But that's like how like different times were back then. Like times are different, man.
I know they got it so good now, don't they?
Dude, I would have been a celebrity. I would have had like so many followers on TikTok and shit. I'd be making money.
You'd have been the star of the high school, dude. Oh my god, kids got it so good now.
I wouldn't have had to have waited so long to get laid, you know, like so many. Dude, my
Oh my
life would have been
God.
different. Would have been
It would have been
different.
so different, dude. I want to I do want to point out though, it's funny, like do you watch Smash at all?
I don't actually know.
Smash Bros.
No.
Okay. There's this is a long, I think maybe in like 2016 or something like that. There was this podcast called the Scar and Toph Show, and it was Scar and Toph. They're both commentators. They're both competitors. In Smash, everyone is like everything, right? It's like a very
Yeah.
small. It's a small scene. So they're like some of the OGs, and they made this podcast. Well, they got into the topic of talent. Like, are you born with it?
Oh yeah.
And is it something you train, etc.? And Toph put it like he's a really smart guy, and he put it in a way that really clicked for me. And it was like how talent manifests is through passion, and you found your passion through Quake, and like that because you said like you wanted to try running, you just threw something at the wall. You're like, I feel like I should know how to run. And but what your passion was is when you found Quake and you started 1v1ing, or maybe not 1v1ing, but just playing and getting better at it. And that is when your talent manifests. It was through passion. And that's what you found, not your calling in life, but what motivated you. And that's what I love about esports, is because we've all gone through that same thing. For me, it was a different game, but it's almost the same experience. Like my talent my passion was competitive gaming. The first time I broke my arm, I thought I was going to be an Olympic speed skater.
Oh
Like
nice.
that's what I thought I was going to do. I was like 12, 13. I was speed skating all the time. Wasn't very good at it, but I liked it, but I wasn't passionate about it. But then I broke my arm. I'd already known about Counter-Strike, but because of my cast, like I could still play. So I was playing Counter-Strike for like almost 6 months while I wasn't speed skating. And I was like, wait, I enjoy this way more than speed skating. And I got super into it. And then that like passion like drove the next 20 years of my life. And I think we all go through something similar, and I don't want people to get discouraged if they're doing something in life and they're not good at it. But I think it's mainly because they're not passionate about it. Just keep digging. You'll find the one thing you're passionate about, like we did. We got lucky. We found it early. Some people don't find it early like we did, but that's why I connect so well with other gamers, because we all share that, as competitive gamers specifically, because we all share that same passion.
Yeah, I like that description of the talent thing, actually, because there's one similar way of thinking about things that I came to a conclusion of, or at least one way of looking at things is, I feel like when we do anything, everything has like a required level of energy to meet the hurdle, essentially. So like let's say you had enough passion, like playing energized you enough that you got to this friction point of, oh fuck, I need to watch demos about how people play Ivy, otherwise I'm gonna get shit on, and I really care about that. So you're willing to then take this cost of time and invest like in a bunch of time, because it's not like, I'm sure you're not like, oh, I can't wait to download this demo, like watch this demo. I'm sure you'd rather just be like playing, so
100%.
and I think that this is almost like with everybody, sort of how life generally works is you kind of move towards what gives you the most energy, because the things that give you the most energy allows you to be able to push past those friction points, because you'll get to like certain friction points with certain things, and that friction point will just like stop you, and then you won't be able to go any further. And I think like if you find stuff that really like literally like gives you energy, like you think about it, and it just like you start feeling like excited a little bit, like you get that energy. That's kind of how I have started to think about things as well, like how I maybe even orient myself, like just asking that question, like what energizes me, what gives me energy. And sometimes I'm like, I'll be talking to someone, having a conversation, and like just like certain ideas, I'm like, oh, I'm like really energized right now. Like these ideas are so interesting to me. Like, and I'm getting a better sense of that as I get a bit older. But yeah, that really, what you said resonated for me in that way, because I feel like a lot of these difficult things we are doing, it's measured by how many friction points you can kind of push past. And I think
Yeah.
that's what tends to. I read this. I read some really good quote once, which about like just the person that wins the gold in their like discipline in the Olympics is just the person that actually went through more of those friction points than everyone else. And that goes. We're going back to the mental thing again. How it's actually more about the mental than it is the yeah. Which I guess is the
Yeah.
point. I guess that's the point you made. It's like talent versus like what is talent? Like
It's passion. I mean, those once you hit those friction points, so for running, maybe you had a talent for it, but you weren't passionate about it. So, you didn't necessarily think of it in a way as like, oh, I want to become the best in the world at this. But, you didn't have that thought. It was just like, oh, this is something I should do, not necessarily become the best at. But then when you found gaming, or Quake in particular, you're like, oh, this is my passion. For me, it was Counter-Strike. It's like, I hit all these friction points and I'm like, I'm going to push past them because I know this is what I enjoy doing and I want to get better at it. Regardless of like, I don't know, back then there was no money in it. let's be honest.
yeah.
No money in it. So that's how you know it was really passion. It was just for the glory. We just wanted, for whatever reason, we enjoyed that feeling of getting better at this game that we chose. And, a lot of people they will reach that first friction point and they'll say, maybe I just don't have a talent for it. And it's like, that's just not true. Like, maybe you're just not passionate enough about it to push past it. And that's all it is. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's got to find their thing. Like I said, we got lucky. I think we found it early, but yeah. Whenever I saw that, I was watching that podcast. This was like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5. The video came out like 2016, but I think I watched it like 4 or 5 years ago. It like, I don't know, it struck a chord in me. I don't know. It just made sense of everything I've done up to this point in my life. It's like, oh, I get it now. I know why I started gaming.
That's funny. That's so funny how that works. Because yeah, you like you've almost like basically you're at the end of the career, and it's like, oh yeah, that's why I started that thing. That was my career for like the last 15 years. Like,
Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny. I get it though. Because I've been going through something similar, and just you get to I think when you get to your 30s as well, like you have all this experience now because your first, your formative years, your teenage years, you're figuring shit out. You're still kind of like not fully independent, and then you get into your 20s and you're kind of like really and you're getting into your career, like whatever your thing is, and you're going out on your own. You're like truly independent. You're getting all this data, and then I feel like you get to your 30s and you're like, dude, why am I such an idiot? Like, why was I doing all this stupid shit? Like, why, there's so much, like, I do so much stupid shit. Why am I all of these ways? You start finally asking yourself the question, like, why am I like these ways? And then you start going into your childhood, and then it's very sad for a while as you start to excavate these old things. You're like, oh Christ, this is why. Oh my God, I'm my parents. I'm my parents. Like, I've denied this my whole life, but I really am just my parents. But it's interesting how that works. But that's like a thing though that's celebrated. Like, people talk about the young people that become super successful and famous, but they don't talk as much about the many people that if not are just late, well yeah, but basically people that are late bloomers, I suppose is one way to put it. That like, I forget who it was. There's this really really super famous author that didn't like write his first actual popular book until his 40s, and like there's so many like various examples of people who figure it out when they get to the point when they're in their 30s and stuff like that. So I agree with you with like the passion thing, because people throw it around as an insult. Oh, you don't have enough passion. It's like, well, I mean, that's cool, that's fine. that's fine if that's true. That's totally fine.
Yeah, that's fine. It just takes time for people to figure stuff out. Like I said, we got lucky, dude. We found it super early, and it's funny because career choice wise, it's probably not a good idea what we
Oh my
did.
god, dude, it's so it's terrible.
It's just not really a good idea. Very few players or content creators, whatever you are in the gaming space, very few people are making like enough money to support themselves. There's not for the rest of their life. It's not a lot of job security. And once you're out of the industry, there's not like a lot of options. So it's not really the greatest choice financially, but when we went on this path, we never even, at least I didn't for a second think that whether or not it was a good choice. I just did it because I was like, I love doing this. I love gaming. I obviously before I went pro, I had like a full-time job and I was doing that. But the second becoming a pro was an option, I quit my job. Like I didn't even hesitate to do it. And my parents questioned it so hard. They were like, hey, especially my dad. My dad was like, you think this is a good idea, man? And I was like, I don't know. This is what I've been playing for like the last 10, at the time it was like 10 years, 11 years. This is what I've always wanted to do. And he was like, listen, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but just to make sure it's the right choice. And I was like, Dad, I'm going to do it. There's no way I'm not doing it. I mean, he was right though. It was a bad choice, but I still don't regret it because I got to experience so much stuff and meet so many people. I got to travel the world. I never would have got to do that otherwise. And yeah, I mean, it was a giant risk. Even if I didn't make it, let's say like the last 10 years didn't happen. Let's say I tried it and I failed immediately and I never got to be a pro. I mean, I still don't regret quitting my job and trying,
Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome, I'm glad I did it because I got to live my dream, dude. Fuck it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing too. Like, you have to go on paths. Like, you don't know. Like, none of us really know. Like, I mean, you can't know. No one can know what's going to happen. So you just have to do stuff. So just like
Yeah.
do the best thing that you have the information for. That's really all you can do. That's the only thing that works. But the thing that's interesting is that people ask us all the time, like, oh, what's the path to get to an esports job or something like that. And even if I feel like if this was like even a regular industry, there's going to be a lot of variance there. But in esports, it's like nothing is replicatable because it's just all replicable. Yep. Because it's all just random shit. And like you said, we were sort of early movers, so we had the advantages with that. But it's such a weird industry because you kind of have to be. I mean, like, you got to do so much. If you want to be a caster, for example, I feel like you have to be, you have to like learn how to do social media. You've got to learn how to make content. You've got to learn how to actually execute the content correctly. You actually have to do learn so many other skills that have actually nothing to do with actually the skill of casting, to have a chance at getting into the industry and to like place yourself in there somehow. It's very difficult now. I think you already mentioned that. So it's kind of weird, but at the same time, like, if this is a thing that I learned too, because when I started, I had a very low point where I was like, I'd had this like this pretty big surgery and it stopped me doing doing a lot of stuff that I found a lot of comfort doing, and so it was like a very big change for me. And then at that same time, I'd sort of dropped out of university already. I had like no idea what I wanted to do, and I was like, I'm in like a really depressed low point. And I was like, okay, I just got to do fucking something. I need to just like spend time doing something. And so I was like, okay, I know how to get good at video games. I'll start a YouTube channel. So and this is like 2012 or something. So I started doing that. And after like 8 to 10 months, like, Faceit came and said, oh, you've been making all this content. Do you want like do you want to like come and like broadcast for us this weekend? We're doing a tournament. You're a Quake person. We need a native English speaker. You seem to know what you're talking about. And they invited me over, and it's like, if I hadn't had made any of those videos, that wouldn't have happened. But I never knew that was going to be a potential outcome. It's the same thing when like when I was learning, I just moved into CS, and at the beginning, like, I was from Quake. Like, no, I wasn't known in the CS community, although I played a shitload of CS over the years. Like, I wasn't known as like a pro or like a caster in that game, and there were like big names still, like big pros that were casting, or like people like Tosspod and you know, people like these legendary commentators and
Yeah.
stuff. And so I was trying to, you know, break in at that point, and it was very difficult because like I just had to prove that, you know, if I got some spots, which I did through Face It, I had to actually really prove that I could do the job. So I did so much. I was like, okay, I'm going to make analytical videos because I get to make some content, but I need to like study the fuck out of this game. I want to have the same quality of analysis I had in Quake. So I went and did that a lot just to get better at casting and improve my understanding and how I could communicate it to the viewers. And then like a year later, because I'd made all these analytical videos, Puckett like reaches out to me one day and he's like, okay, you know, you've got all this analytical content, even though like you're a play-by-play guy. Do you think you could do like the color with Sadakist at MRG Aspen because Anders and Semler are not available? and so I got that job just because I made that, but I didn't make the content for that purpose. I made it just to like improve my understanding. So there's like just by like taking action on things and doing stuff, you know, things happen, or you learn new things, or you learn that wasn't something that you should spend your time on. So it's like, it's all like positives, but it's hard when you don't know what to do to pick a direction to apply yourself in. It's very hard.
But the reason you did that is because you had passion for it.
Yeah, that's true.
You didn't know any of the outcomes. You weren't like, oh, if I do this, I'll become a caster. It was like, no, I'm just this is a good way to improve myself. And I'm just going to do it. Like, I'll get better. And it turned out great. Like, dude, when people ask how to become a pro or get in the esports, I don't know what to tell them. I'm like, you don't understand. I just like played. I found Cal League when I was like 14, or it wasn't, yeah, it was Cal League when I was 14. And I just played for fun. And then because I really enjoyed it and I was passionate about it, I just never stopped. And then I met the right people through the game who had the same interests as me, who were similarly skilled, and everything kind of just fell into place. And it wasn't like I was actively trying to do that. It just happened naturally. And I was like, so I tried to tell people, I'm like, I can't give you, there's no formula. It's like, you just have to want to do things on your own, and then opportunities are going to present themselves over time. I mean, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get unlucky. Luck is a huge part of life. Like, unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Like, if I didn't meet Pujan, Cutler, those guys way back in the day, would I have made it to pro? Maybe. It's possible, but I don't think I'd have been as successful as I was without them, because I learned a lot playing with those guys over the years. So, and I didn't even meet them directly. I met them through another friend named Jimmy. We go back even further. He played a pug with Pujan, and they became friends. And then he invited me into the Ventrilo throwback, of a 10-man where they were all hanging out. And then I became friends with them. So it's just like it's like this butterfly effect that happens when you just do things. You just have to do something. Don't try to have someone create a formula for you. Just do stuff, and things will fall into place.
Yeah, yeah. Taking action is good. It's very good. Yeah. Taking action. Yeah, it's a tough one. Like when people ask me that question so much, and I always like. And also, like, with becoming a pro, like my whole channel is basically for people that want to get good. And some, I've had like people comment every so often, like, oh, why are you peddling all this like information, because this is just a pipe dream and it's like a really bad way for people to spend their time. And it's like, I am not telling anyone how to spend their time, but for the people that do want to spend their time this way, here is this content for them. And if people ask me that question directly, I usually say, look, what you're trying to do is very risky. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. You just have to be honest that it's risky. And then what is this rational, sensible thing to do? You don't have to do this, but the rational, sensible thing to do with stuff that's risky is much like, your financial portfolio. What do? You diversify it. Like you have school, or you have something, you have some other plan. And that you should be, I say this almost hypocritically. I didn't really have any guidance growing up, so I'm giving this to those that need it to hear it. But you should have a plan. Just be honest with yourself. If it's very risky, that's totally fine. It's actually better that you have another plan, because you have something to contrast that thing with. And I think it like better channels your energy as to like what you want to achieve, because you are faced with the perspective that this is the other path. And when I wish I had had that more of a laser focus when I was doing a lot of stuff when I was younger, because I was a bit all over the place in some respects. Even though I had some things guiding me, I was still not focused enough because I didn't have enough of a sense of that, like agency and control of my life in more of a long term way. I was very short term oriented, but I had to figure out a lot by myself. So that's just kind of where I ended up. So yeah, it's very risky. Don't drop out of school, that kind of stuff. No. Especially not now. Especially not now. And if you're trying to become a caster, I think it's amazing because you can learn loads of skills by trying to do that. But it's even more risky, I feel like, than being a player, which is so hard to do as well. So
really, I think it's harder to become a caster.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I think so. Right now, I think so. Yeah, right now, I think so. A successful. I mean, it's hard even to define successful. I guess successful would be more about just like what broadcasts you can get on and stuff. Because the thing with casting too is that I feel like it's being devalued with co-streaming and like lots of budget cuts all over the place. So it doesn't really incentivize casters to invest a lot in growing their products. I feel like just the relationship that a lot of tiers have with the talent is not as like ideal as it maybe could be, but that might be a reflection of just the macroeconomic times that we're in at the moment.
Possibly. I can't really comment on it because I'm not in that space.
Yeah.
But from the outside, it looks very hard to get in. Like casting looks just on-air talent in general looks so scarce. There's so many more players when you really look at it. So I'm like,
that's a fair point.
Going down that career path just seems so difficult. Maybe you could get to that point with less time investment, but than being a player. Because I mean, getting to the pro level as a player maybe takes more time. I don't know. Like, I've never been a caster, so it is hard for me to comment. But just the amount of spots available for being a caster is so few compared to a player that I don't know. That seems so hard to get into.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I wonder if we had like that data of like the population sizes, if we could see like versus the amount of like positions. I'm curious actually because that's a really interesting question. But yeah, it's definitely very hard. You're right too. And if you get on a circuit, you might have maybe a bit more sticking power than maybe a player on a roster, because it's not like you can lose a tournament as a caster. Like you can I guess have like a shitty cast and stuff like that. But that was always the fun part about casting, by the way. I felt like was that you get to kind of like experience some of the highs and lows, but like not really like obviously the full high or the full low. So you never get that like feeling when you're knocked out of a tournament and you're so fucking depressed. It's just like the worst feeling. And it's over, and everyone is still there, like going to the arena, and everyone's in the hotel, like strategizing, like setting up their scrims, and you're there. Just you might as well not be, but because you're just waiting to like get on that plane, but you're in that like weird space of time where you're still able to like see everybody that's still in the tournament. It just feels horrible. It's terrible.
It's the worst feeling in the world, dude. Oh my god. There's so many tournaments, because obviously in Counter-Strike we didn't win a damn thing on any of the teams I was on. But I was fortunate enough to be on a good enough team we qualified for 5 majors in a row. So we were a very strong team within North America itself. But in almost, in every major except one, we didn't make it out of groups. So we spent a majority of our time at these tournaments like literally just being depressed. So I didn't go out very often and see things in these countries that I was visiting because I was depressed. And so, the lows are way lower, I feel like, and the highs are way higher. But there is that, I think as a caster, you get to enjoy the moment more.
Yeah.
You're in it. You're a part of it. I think that's an experience I didn't get to have. And I, on some level, always wanted to be a part of.
Well, hey man, I'm pretty sure that VCT are definitely like taking players on like the talent pool. So you might have an in, man. You should hit him up.
I don't think I've people have told me all the time on stream, like, you have a really good voice, you should cast. And I was like, I appreciate that, thank you, but I think I'd actually suck at casting. I don't know, I think I'm bad at small talk. That's my issue. So like, I respect casters because I know how hard it is when dead time arrives. and you have to fill,
Yeah,
I would be horrible at that.
indeed.
I just would.
It's so funny actually because I mean, oh my god. That's something
It's
that James
something
and
you
I
don't
were like
normally think
really good
about.
at, like because we like took it as like a thing, or like if we get dead time, it's like it's like a challenge of like
Mhm.
how like we're gonna. It's a challenge of like because this is like you say, like it's the moment when you're just out there by yourself. And these days, like no tournament's gonna like keep the camera on, but I had so many like so many casts, like so many where I had to like cover like a couple hours just
Yep.
with no ad breaks, just like talking random shit. And James and I got really good at that, and it ended up becoming like quite fun to experience that. But it's nerve wracking. It's when because you do feel like you're out there on this like life raft in the middle of the ocean. There's no help nearby, and you've got to wait for a rescue. And you just got
Yeah.
to figure it out. That's what it feels like a little bit.
A
Um,
100%. And y'all are fucking amazing at it. Like y'all, you two and Similar and Anders were good at it, and Sadakis was good at it. Like that. I mean, to me, that's why all of y'all were like top casters that went to every tournament, was because not only were y'all good at casting, but y'all feel dead time better than like, some amateurs that maybe might be good at casting, but then they don't, that part of the job is not appreciated by a lot of people, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's not as visible anymore because I think a lot of these
Yeah.
more professionalized productions are not as comfortable allowing that to be the situation. If there is like a delay, they'll have so many contingencies, whether it's like content or like various other things. And I get it, like it makes sense, because that's going to be perhaps like more engaging to certain degree. But it's funny because it was kind of hero building in a way for us as the casters, because we would kind of like save the the time on the broadcast at least, and like try to make it entertaining for people. And we get, I think, props for people for doing that. And it's something actually where I was kind of sad when casting with Sean, because Sean and I were like, oh my god, Sean and I can talk forever, and we have like a really good back and forth. And in the dead time, we would do so much research actually on matches, because I think both Sean and I, like you already mentioned, like how hard Sean works with this kind of stuff, but for me, going into casting Valorant, it was so different because in CS, it's very hard to prepare for a match in terms of like trying to do what maybe like if you're playing against a Valorant team, you can like see the VODs, you can see the comps, you can see the styles of play, you can see the map pool. And sure, you can see the map pool in CS, but you can like definitely have a way better understanding of how a team will probably play by doing your research in Valorant, and you can like very clearly point out in certain like comps how those strategies should play, and with the players how it should work. So you can get to like some really cool detail actually if you do the study in Valorant. But in CS, it's like, I mean, there's very limited innovation. It's very
Yeah.
stale, and all of the fancy tricks and stuff. A lot of that stuff's very hard to actually see in this from the spectator point of view. So, but Valorant, it's like, oh, if there's like an agent, or they do a certain type of default, and there's certain types of utility, oh, now you can like really like lay it out for the audience, the things that they can expect, or like win conditions, or like you can just enter a cast knowing some of the win conditions much more clearly than CS. So Sean and I think we would spend hours like going over like here is like a list of all of the talking points from all of the strategic narrative, the tactical narrative, like the emotional narrative of like the players and all the kind of stuff. And so we'd have all this like work we would do, and then we'd go into a cast. And so then like if the comps and everything came out like we thought, if there was ever a timeout, we would then use the timeout like we were the coaches, and we would like discuss like what the solution is, as opposed to like talking about stuff that has happened. And this is something I always like to do in CS, is if you get to timeouts, pretend you're the IGL, because that's what you should do if you're, in my opinion, if you're like casting as an IGL. Every round you call is some level of conditioning. Hopefully it's more coherent than for some teams. In sometimes some teams it's not very coherent, but hopefully it is coherent. And then you get to see, you like, all the information's there for you to make predictions, because the opponent has the information, the guy that's been calling has the information, and if you know the game well enough, you should be able to predict based on where you see the weaknesses, what the solutions are. It gets narrowed down, so now you can present that what you think is the most likely thing. And so that'd be like the kind of stuff that we would like really like love doing, and to fill dead time. And we didn't really get much of a chance together to do much of that, but that was like one of the things that I felt like we brought to the table that I enjoyed.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just got a sneak peek into what it's like to be a top tier caster. Take notes right there. That's what if you want to become a caster, you need to be doing that shit.
Dude, it's my one of my like guiding philosophies, because I was a player first, and I was initially brought into Quake, was like, okay, you're the analyst, you're the color guy, and I was casting lots of people that I could beat in these tournaments, and so that's like who I was in that moment, and I always like took that with me, this idea of I want it to be that if the players listen to me and they will respect what I'm saying because they feel like I'm accurately representing them and the game. And if I can do that, that's the guiding lights, basically. Like that's all I care about. If I do that really well, and I do it if I do that in an entertaining way that's delivered well, the audience will like it because I'm just telling the story of the game effectively to them in an entertaining way. But if I misrepresent the game, this is a problem now for me. Because also like players' careers are like made by some of the like how casters could talk about people, like, you know, who people are interested in, how they talk about people, like talking about, you know, giving shit to people on social media and stuff. I've seen some of that stuff sparked over the years by, you know, criticisms that come from the talent narratives. So you got to be 100%. Careful with that, I think. Yeah.
It's okay. This is how you know. Oh my God, I'm so petty for remembering this. But so you and James Bardoff okay. So you two were casting a game, and it was, I want to say it was MLG Columbus.
Yes, yeah, the overtime game on fucking Cobble. No, not Cobble. Yeah, Cobble. No. It's not Cobble? No. Oh, that was Mouse Sports. That was Mouse Sports and somebody else.
Y'all casted us versus Gambit. It was a best of 3 to get out of groups. And I'm pretty sure that was the game. I want to say it was. But anyway, we were playing Cash. And I'm so petty for remembering this. I held a grudge against James Bardoff for years because of this. So
it's not the first time I've heard that. I heard that recently from someone. I can't remember who.
We were on Cash, and we did a mid default. I went over boost, and I dropped in the mid, and someone on Gambit was at sandbags, crouched, hiding. We didn't know someone was there. We had mollies, and I think they were on an eco. And I remember in the game why we did it this way, because I made the call. I wasn't the IGL, but I made the call. Like in mid, I was like, "Don't molly sandbag," because I, for whatever reason, thought someone was sandbag. Maybe I saw it's like head or something. I don't know, but I was like, "Don't molly it." I wanted to peek up short into A site and see if I can get a pick, because I knew that guy was playing off contact and sound. So I was going to try and catch one of his teammates off guard and then 180 and kill him. Okay. But the cast, I remember watching it back. And James Bardoff got so mad. He was like, "Why are they not mauling sandbag? It's just not smart." I'm paraphrasing, but in essence, he was like flaming us, or flaming me in particular. And I held a grudge for him for so long because he did that. And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. I know what I was doing. Like, I didn't molly it for a reason, because I had this idea." And it, to be fair, ended up working. I killed someone in sight. And I think we killed Sandbag and I lived. But
nice.
Anyway.
Fuck yeah.
But anyway, I held a grudge forever because of how he casted it and how it could be perceived by the public that I don't know what I'm doing. And I know that wasn't his intention, but that, to your point, how people cast things does matter. And how I could see how some of the things, the way you say it, present it, could be seen as like pretentious by players, because you are like assuming that you know better. That's not what you're meaning in the moment, but it could be perceived that way.
Yeah, I think it's something that can happen too. When you watch a lot, I think that can be kind of like a you get accustomed to the fact that you have so much more information than everyone else that's actually playing. And I think that sometimes can lead to that kind of mistake, because you can get you see a similar situation play out in a bunch of ways, and the solution seems really obvious to you, and so maybe I can see how that mistake can happen. I think I think again it's one of those small things where I think it separates, you know, good from great casters, because I at least for me personally, I think I think when you're so like shit talking players and stuff, I think okay, that's fine on the desk. Like that's kind of to some extent their job is to grill people,
Yeah.
and that's because they're supposed to have that kind of like, oh, it's an ex player. It should be someone actually kind of similar to how we were talking about. Oh, you got to have like a coach that gets respect of the players. I feel like it should be someone that is an ex player to so in an ideal world, or someone that has that. Like you've got Maniac and Pimp, for example, in CS, like as like very clear examples of this, where if they critique another player, like you can feel as a viewer like, okay, well that person really has the experience reputation to do that, and I think the players can also feel that way towards that person. So I think it's a much more natural dynamic. But I have seen in esports a lot that people will be in the position where that's kind of their role, but they don't actually quite have the experience or reputation to do that and get away with it with the players at least. So I definitely see that, but it's really hard too, because if you don't have an experience playing, there's a lot of stuff that you can miss. Like one of the common things I talk about frequently is I think I usually use poker as do you play poker?
I used to, yeah.
Yes, so you know how like in tournament poker, you a lot of it's about like stack sizes and do you have like enough like fold equities that's like you like shove and you can like convince people to actually fold in all that kind of stuff. So I usually use this idea that when you're getting, let's say you just hit 10 big blinds or less than 10 big blinds on a tournament, and you've got the ante, it's like eating away at your stack, so you're losing like massive amounts of fold equity every single round. You're in a spot where you have only shit spots. Like you have to shove at some point because you can't have enough chips to play a hand. So you have to just get it all in and hope most people fold, and so on and so forth. And you're playing a wider range there as well. So you have like a really shit spot. Your spot only gets shitter the longer you wait. So do you take a shit spot now or like a more shit spot like later and just hope to get lucky at some point? There are lots of spots that players face where they've got, it's like, okay, I've got a 20%, like is my best play right now. I know it's very likely if I wait, the next best play is probably like 15 or 10%. Like it only goes down from here. So I have to do something that looks stupid, but it's the best possible risk that I can reasonably take right now. And I think it's hard sometimes for casters to understand those moments if they don't have a lot of experience in the game of how players understand risk taking and how some plays can look stupid. But if you have the experience to kind of understand how players think or how those decisions are made, it makes it a lot easier to say, oh, this is what you would expect to happen. This is what this guy decided to do, as opposed to being like, oh, like, why did he do that type of thing? Because that doesn't come off, I think, well. It kind of comes off negatively, and it also comes off like you might not know what you're talking about, or it can come off like you're kind of, like you said, it's like you know better than the player. So none of those things work very well, I feel like. In most cases, casters do it and some can get away with it, I guess, but I didn't like to do that.
I mean, yeah, and to be fair, a lot of players give casters shit probably undeservedly in most cases. Like I said, I should not have held a grudge against James Fardoff for that long because of some comment he made that honestly he was right. You should molly it. It's the safe play. But yeah, it happens all the time, and it is a matter of respect for sure.
Did you resolve it? Have like a moment, like you're on like a mushroom trip, and like, okay, that's that moment when James Fardoff said this fucking thing, and I need to like process this right now.
No, okay. Well, the reason it got brought up again was I was streaming. This was like 2 or 3 years ago, I think. I don't remember when it was, but I was streaming, and someone had mentioned in chat, I was like, has a caster ever pissed you off? And I was like, yes, question. As a matter of fact, a caster has. And then I brought that up. And then as I was explaining, I was like, there's no reason I should be mad at him. That's dumb of me. And so, in that moment, I kind of, after explaining the story, I realized like, I'm pretty dumb. Like, why am I holding a grudge? I'm an adult. That's stupid.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I bet like every player though has maybe not every player, but I bet like most players, a majority, I would even say, if I wanted to like bet money on it, I bet the majority of players probably have like there's like a thing that a caster has said about them that they were just like, oh, fuck this guy.
100%. I would say vast majority of players do. Well, I guess it depends whether or not they watch it back with the casters.
Yeah.
Like in CS, I very rarely did that. It just so happened that I watched some of my major games back with casters, But if it was like a regular match, I would watch back the demo. So I never had the casters in it. Um, but yeah, it definitely happens. And the analyst desk as well. You were saying, they don't necessarily have privy to like what's actually happening within the game itself. They have an outside view. So like if
Yeah.
a player makes like a weird choice, like they make a weird play, sometimes it wasn't even them. It could be like their teammates saying to do it, or like their IGL
Yeah.
telling, and then that player gets flamed for it. Like I'm not
Yes.
gonna go on
Yes.
social media and flame my IGL for that play. That's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
he believed this is what I needed to do to win the round. I do it, even if it makes me look stupid. Like you just have to do that. And so getting mad at a caster or like an analyst for not knowing that is so irrational. It's like it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's that's actually something I try to bear in mind too. Is in the calculation is that like comms are not perfect all the time,
Yeah.
or like sometimes people miss comms, and so sometimes that like that missing piece of information is the reason the mistake happens. And so it's like
Mhm.
I remember that's something I try to point out if I think that it kind of
We
like
do.
looks like that, because sometimes you can kind of tell that it looks like maybe info was missing. But also there's another one too. There's actually another interesting one is sometimes like players will do stuff intuitively, and the problem is you can't really quantify the intuition, because the intuition is based off of like their thousands of hours of experience. So you like this is a way that I tend to explain this. So I'm actually I'm enjoying this explanation because I was thinking about this a lot recently, and I'm kind of settling on this as I think a good way to think about it. But because intuition is like a feeling. It's like you
Yeah.
have this like very high bandwidth part of your mind that you can't like consciously access, that is like constantly doing pattern recognition and modeling the world around you and all this kind of stuff, and it's operating like this crazy level, and it's doing all kinds of shit. Like when you throw a ball, your brain is doing trigonometry. Like you probably don't know how the fuck trigonometry works, you forgot it from school, like you don't have a protractor or a calculator, you can't do trigonometry on the fly, but your brain is doing that. And the way that your brain communicates that to you is through a feeling. When you're trying to
Yep.
throw that ball into the bucket, like you get a feeling like, okay, based on this amount of like force, I kind of like feel like it's gonna go. I feel like it's gonna go in. It feels like it's gonna go in, and then you throw it and it goes in. Like that's so. What was conveyed there is a feeling. It's not like a math equation or something. No, that's happening though. That's your brain is doing that, and so that's kind of the same thing in the game. When the player is acting on their intuition, they get a feeling, and they have to act off of the feeling, because oftentimes they got to trust that. And the problem is, if players don't trust their intuition or instincts, you have a big, like this commonly happens, and it's like a big problem in performance.
Yep. If you lose your intuitive sense as a player, well, I think specifically as a competitor, you got to hang it up. Like the best players in the world have the strongest intuitive sense of what's right and wrong. It can't be explained. Like it just can't. It's like I said, a feeling. We just feel it, and we just do it. And if it doesn't work, I mean, it happens. We
Yeah,
look
yeah,
stupid sometimes, but it felt right. It felt like the right thing to do. I can't tell you why.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. I just this is like another idea I love about, like I just love about all this stuff, and I recognized it from a long time ago. Just like this duality of like I've got this the kind of conscious, because you're using your conscious thinking for a lot of things that are important, like whether it's communication or like just I have to remember the protocols, and I'm like talking to my teammates about like the macro. Like there's lots of things that you're doing there consciously, but at the same time, there's so many systems that operate best when it's just left in that unconscious mode, which is just like executing your mechanics or your intuition, your feeling of the timings, like all of these different things, and all these like happening at the same time. And so then when people get pressured, what happens is they start to like lose some of their ability to focus because they're getting distracted by something, and then they've got maybe that distraction is that they're not playing so well, because they're super aware of that because of the pressure, and then now they're actually focusing too much on their mechanics, and that's not, you can't do that, because you make it worse, because it doesn't operate properly if you're consciously focusing on it. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So you got to be like in this like very kind of like delicate sweet spot when it comes to like how you're performing from the mental point of view. And so I find that so fascinating, because like linking all this stuff is so interlinked. It's like it's so interesting.
I you know, I would say the times where I felt like me and my team were clicking at our best and the way we tapped into our intuitive sense as a collective, is when everyone trusts each other.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you don't trust each other, that's when you get caught in those like analysis paralysis moments mid game. And that's when you falter because you're not sure if what your teammate's doing is good or not. Like you're like, I don't necessarily, I think he has a bad read. But if your whole team trusts each other, that never happens. It's just, say like your IGL says, do this, or like your teammate says, swing. You don't even think whether or not you should swing. You just do it.
Yes.
And that is when I think you're operating at the highest level. It's this level of trust you need between your teammates. And that's what makes team games so compelling to me. It's like, it's not just you, that you're not relying on yourself. You have to put some, modicum of trust in your teammates so that y'all can win this game. You cannot carry the burden yourself.
Yeah.
Man, it's like I said, this is how you know we're passionate about this.
Yeah.
We're getting deep in the weeds on this.
But it's so interesting because there's so many blockers to that instinct, being able to play instinctively. There's so many potential blockers, like of like these various like states you're trying to get into. That's again like going back to the whole like Rafa thing with like the believing yourself and like just like resiliency mentally. It's like being able to hold the right, because I think you mentioned this IGLs too, that they're always in this like they're able to always be in that kind of that system of like calling not necessarily flow per se, but that they have such a good feel that, and the way that they communicate is very confident, because they just understand their identity as a caller and how to execute calling to a high level. Because I do think that getting into the flow of calling is like that is an interaction with the other team that's, I guess, harder to make a judgment on like this. But with all of that said, like a team this is why people get better in like certain team environments, like the EG team environment, like from last year at the end. Like they have obviously amazing team chemistry, which is the team chemistry is like, and it is such a good like positive physiological counter to the negative physiological effects of competition, where you have all the stress, the cortisol is like rushing through your system, all the pressure, like the adrenaline, noradrenaline, all this stuff like going into your system. And if you have a really good like team chemistry and culture and focus, like the team is set up well there, you're like gonna have a way better time dealing with that. Like and not only that, you'll be able to actually use it to enhance your abilities, because the stress of competition actually enhances you physiologically, but it can also do the opposite. So it's so interesting how you can get advantages from all those intangibles. So it's better to have like a team with people that like can have good chemistry, but also the right role fits or whatever. And that's better than having the superstar team that doesn't necessarily have the good chemistry, because you'll be then maybe like creating blockers to players being able to play instinctively and intuitively, because they won't feel maybe either comfortable enough, or they won't have the trust that you're talking about, or maybe if players have the self-doubt, then they're going to be a little bit more disconnected to that feeling of instinct. Because players that have more self-doubt, they don't lack the instinct, it's they lack the ability to execute on the instinct because of the self-doubt. So that's what you have to deal with. So there's so many like little blockers to like these high levels of performance.
Yeah, and I think the way you put it is like perfect. It's like additive, or it's like it's like adding versus multiplying. With your teammates, like if you put 5 superstars together that don't work well together, they're like you're like adding each other's powers together, your talent together. But if you have like the EG roster, everything kind of just fell into place perfectly. They almost multiplied each other's talent, and it manifests in a team that wins worlds. Like the individually, I'm not sure if, I mean, obviously you have to be individually great to win a world championship. There's no doubt about it. But like, do you think that they're that much better individually than the players on the other team that they're beating? I mean, not really. They're probably pretty close. But the reason that they went to the next level is because they synced up on a level that like you can't even really quantify. Like it just worked. Everything, you can't explain it. It works.
Yeah. It's like both like equally beautiful, but also maddening, because it's like hard to like, you got to like figure out how to deconstruct it a little bit. And I mean, that's honestly, that is to be maybe it's I should not be maddened by it, because like it's the pursuit of doing that that's been something that I found really interesting. So I've enjoyed, the process of trying to deconstruct that a bit, and it's kind of interesting because I do think that's where, for me, the GMing thing makes sense, but at the same time, I feel like esports has a long way to go in terms of like stability and like resources for teams to be able to like really execute on some of that stuff. So you have everything you need to like really do a good job. Because I don't know, have you read the book Legacy? Okay, so if I had a podcast studio, if we were doing all of this in person, this is like the book that I would have, like, the 50 copies of that I would like get signed, that I give to people. It's like a Legacy by James Kerr is a book about that answers the question: how have the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, how have they been the most winning team in sports history? Like, how have they achieved that? And the answer is culture, team culture. But the book is really an investigation as to what that means. Like, what is their team culture? Like, what are the principles and fundamentals of their team culture, and how do they how did they put that into the team? How do they create those systems? Like, what is all of that? And the book does a great job at comprehensively going through all of the major kind of principles of how their culture operates. And so it's an excellent book for anyone that's trying to like build a team, run a team of any type. So I really recommend that.
I'm gonna definitely get it then. If you recommend it, I'm getting it 100, because I know who the All Blacks are. I didn't know they were the most winning team in history across all sports. That's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. It was actually recommended to me by when I joined 100Ds. There was he's now become like a really close friend. I've had him on my channel a bit. His name's Casey, and he was like the performance dietitian. So he's actually just generally really interesting to talk to, because he's a dietitian and a research. He's got a published work as a researcher in the supplements industry, and he's done a lot of stuff in the medical world in that way. But he's obsessed by like the intersection of performance and diet. So like for athletes essentially. And so that's like his thing. And so I talked to him a lot about like a lot of these like nerdy things, and he's like, dude, you need to read this book. and so I read it, and it's an amazing blueprint, honestly, of what makes teams great. Because all those intangible things that we're talking about, it I guess like one way to put it is, I always like to try to think of things in systems first, because I think in anything that's complex, you can't really, everything that's complex tends to emerge from a system of some kind. Like, you can't just say, I want this outcome, I'm going to try to very strictly force this outcome to happen. It's better if you create a system where that outcome emerges. So for example, if you create a team where people want to show up on time, versus a team where you are like telling people, if you don't show up on time, I'm gonna, I don't know, dock your pay or something like that. Like, just trying to like control that outcome very strictly. Instead, create a team culture, like a feeling of other teams, so they feel energized and empowered, and they want to do that themselves. And so you're essentially generating certain character traits that you want your team to have through the way that the team operates, through how you've aligned the team's values, how you communicate those values, all these different things. So that's like how you want to achieve the outcome of the best team, is create the right systems. And so like that book really goes into great detail of how they did that with the All Blacks, because with the All Blacks, the whole idea is that like, hey, this legacy has been successful, like and it's outlasted any one player, any one like coach, any one like manager. Like, they have somehow, this has persisted over a long period of time. So like, what is that? So it's pretty good.
In some sense, it sounds like, obviously I haven't read the book, so I'm not sure, but it almost seems like a blueprint to how to be a good leader, almost.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I would say that the information is there because ultimately, like, the leadership is really about just embodying the values that you want to see. Well, obviously you have to be in a position of leadership in the team, but then this is ultimately, I think, how everything works in any grouping of people. Like, it's the leaders that set the culture. So and by setting the culture, they're setting the acceptable standards of operation. So if they set a standard of operation because they are making it permissible that you have like a poor quality behaviors, like whether that is being late or just like not working hard or being shitty to people, like whatever it is, if they allow that stuff to happen, then it's permissible, and that's the standard. So that's how things tend to change. I think it's the leaders that have to change things by setting and holding the examples that they want in their culture. So it does a good job of at least stating like what are great practices for that within the context of a team. But to be honest, I think it honestly just because one of their philosophies is better humans make better All Blacks is like one of the philosophies. Yeah. So but with this said, there is another book recommendation that I like for leadership, which is just I wouldn't say it's as profound, but it's just Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and I like that book just because I think more people need to hear the message of that, essentially, just because it's about it talks about extreme ownership, the idea that you're taking on as everything as not as your fault per se, but you're taking ownership on what happens. So it doesn't have to be your fault necessarily, but you're accepting what's happening and you're figuring out a way to deal with it and taking responsibility for things. And it's all within the context of how the Navy SEALs actually operate, and they're obviously like they operate in very small teams where everybody is highly skilled, and so it's like a very all of the stuff around the Navy SEALs I think is really interesting. If you're looking at if you're trying to understand how small teams, Counter-Strike team is a small team, operate to like a very high standard. I think the Navy SEALs, like looking at what Navy SEALs do, is actually really good. And there's lots of like great books on how they do shit. So that's just like one of the many. So another good one. Dude, we've been going for 3 hours. I feel like you've won because I'm like, dude, I need to tap out. It's been 3 hours. I don't have to tap out.
I'm okay with tapping out. It's fine. I haven't eaten today, so I'm okay with that. I can go get some food.
Nice, awesome. Well, this was really fun. We should definitely do this more. Actually, something I'm doing more of is like just random spaces on like Twitter, just to shoot the shit, see who turns up, and talk about stuff. Like I did one with coaching with Vapin, and I'm forgetting there's another coach that turned up. I forget. I think it's coach of Sad Pandas. I think. What's his name? I forget. Anyway, we had a really great discussion about like coaching and just sort of like just what we think are good for players and just like talking about like just various like things around coaching, and it was really fun. So I'll send you a message when I'm doing one of those, and maybe you can jump on if you're free.
If assuming I don't have a job, I'm free.
Nice. We got to put the app into good use.
We'll see what happens, but I'm always down. Barring I don't have any like I said, anything to work on at the time. But yeah, I'm always down.
Sweet. Well, I really appreciate it, James. It's really fun to catch up because I feel like you said, we're kind of like, we don't really talk because it might come across like we're we talk all the time or something, I feel like, but we don't. But we have, it goes back to your point. Like we share something in common that's that thread of passion that is in harmony when we speak. So
anyone who's in competitive gaming in any capacity is essentially my brother. We share that passion, so I understand you, and we don't have to talk all the time to still have that understanding. I've got the utmost respect for you.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to leave it. All right. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.